Thank you.
I think that's not too exceeded card.
Yeah, that's really hot. Yeah.
Oh, thank you very much. No worries.
To avoid rescheduling, I might have fun to do.
Yeah, I'm happy to
and
hand it
my
to you.
coffee.
So you're like actually making.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Well,
guess
there's not
like
like big
yourself.
tanks
Well, it's triple
a lot, or in the drink
It is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Or no? No, I'm fine. Okay.
If I pass this down.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, it's nice.
There's not even like a vent in this portion. Is that the situation? Oh, I can see.
How did it go up?
Oh,
It was
yeah.
at 76, now it's at 77.
Oh, yeah, I guess it was already really low and I just.
Well, it's
fine.
just.
You're trying, but it didn't seem. Is there no windows to open in here?
No, there's not. It's not.
No, behind you. Can you check behind you?
I don't think
That says on high, okay.
Yeah.
Windows are even worse. Yeah, it's worse. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's going this close.
That's fine.
What? Oh,
Is it all good for me to send it?
yeah.
Yes, please.
Just send it. And I'm setting two timers, one for the plan and then one for the end. I wanted to, but they didn't let me. I think Georgetown has like multiple parts for each.
They do?
semester.
Yeah,
It's like part 1 for 5.
Oh, really? 2 is fine.
Let me know when you'll get it.
I just
I just, that's fine. Are you on hotspot? No. I can try something. No, it's fine. I don't.
Good?
Yeah.
I finished what is the environment. Currently, fossil fuel producers are obligated to repair the environment after they no longer produce resources, but repair is so expensive. The operators delay and obscure retirement or go bankrupt. Lockman 25. How much to repair? The fixed structure channels and liability capital benefits or abandoned obligations operators to be to repair. After making profits, it is regard operators going to want to preserve option reusing item infrastructure space operators through this repair illusion. The financial position of repair to determine the delaying back complex conditions difficult to disprove. Either case leaves millions of fragile and overused oil and gas wells that are one accident away from catastrophic environmental destruction. In Lockman 25 BOEM. BSE showed for offshore gas wells that we gas wells from this it's not produced years and other repairing pieces. Environmentally disaster collisions, operations, obligation to central operators able to stand liability may require operators to provide pension insurance that will go heavily assessed without having time any pension status that can be manipulated. Essentially, goes such goes crazy, rust going to crumble off the pseudo bills, pile up, operators going to fail, oil spills, devastate ocean biodiversity, collapsing global ecosystems, and the fishing industry out of Sand Spring. Huge no general waste operations, oil slicks, can make the window currents currently around the world, absolutely fishing industries, oil and beaches, first fishing, oil surveys, and such a seabed. The wildlife work blockers, the motion extinction that begins with oceans, whiplashes back into humans, we say which that's how it's all over spill. World maybe not drowning oil, surfing no crash, human population, ecological collapse, costs extinction, the true scale. Ecological dependencies are unknowable, each loss could cost 3 points or affect other critical systems, creating global debt spirals. Beard LL21, disruption of integrity, as per founder regression, social vegetation, conservation, population, possibility, purpose, global semester integrity, creative argues. It's unlikely that civilization, however, ecological observation, branches of potable critical systems, reverse mechanisms, good probability of catastrophe, start social technological system, critical reinforcement, be able to lose their changes, but it's changes that perpetuate working adaptation systems, harassment, subverting catastrophes or resources. The depth or beyond means of building society, if it will lose tipping points beyond which return becomes difficult. Ocean food shortages cause extinction. Crib 23, conflict originate with food shortages, leading to Increase the original picture associated with the chemical combat, nuclear conflict, contributing to nuclear winter, causes harvest failure, trigger further wars from nuclear atomic weaponry, plus months of warlords, food crisis, China, Russia, Pacific, nuclear response to another Middle all cases of farmers and the explosive chain leading to extinction. Weldings account for half of methane emissions. Amara et al. 22. Methane is integral. The climate neutrality system emissions time OHGCs for API sub-Saharan G 2 times the GHG characteristic of this heavy total distribution, a small fraction responsible for this for a majority level of the large operators observations required report equipment negligence and severe environmental emissions for work. The documents are related to operators responsible for emissions that suggest increases for low pressure wells. The top 50% says that about 30% reduction, top 5% exhibit 90% higher rates of reduction declines, so just low pressure lights are functionally supermitting. Their detection is CH4 exceed their 130% 80% OHG low production. Their cumulative emissions of significant underscores the inclusion of low production sites as part of any mitigation for CH4. And methane leaks cause extinction from climate overshoot. Overwhelms adaptive capacity pairs at L23 and fossil fuels. It's essential, but during the time shift, essential to methane is possible, plus missile war low methane is level torch. Methane articles 0.51 degrees Celsius, warming cutting methane class of stretching, can provide fast mitigation. It's critical to whenever this warming so few and avoid to be points very close to negative interactions with one cascade of the points. Every commit warming on every decade is the warming person essential to quick fast stretches by time to adapt to reduce warming. With our area subject to exposed 48% of the population bottom 3 million livelihood will be destroyed with mega drought, nucleus and loss of 100 million subject of global warming. Some never societies are adapted to a climate niche that follows from peak with a near climatic April warming and overall societal adaptive capacity. It'll make or break climate mitigation, high short-term GWP and immense tropospheric ozone, ALA, L21, methane gas climate change. Tony difference scale response to temperature season saturation demand reduction with nature spicy Celsius the catastrophic points rapid scale of mitigation current available convenience of warming to reduce methane associated with diseases for discrete pollution or level ozone causes premature death. Environmental earnouts solve fossil fuel producers are charged to deposit based on their expected potential damages due to disrepair, which is put into a bond. If they do less damage than expected, they are refunded a profit from the bond. If there are more destructive, the bond value is deducted. That incentivizes repair by making cleanup profitable. Lockman 25 earnouts overshoots whose customer neighbors when people transfer the possible refunded social because people determine how much some materialize these. But describe as pollution, subsidy, avoided pollution, shares, social eventual functions of reality in water law. Represents farmers of the Japan allies, interest regulators, operates that earnouts, spiritual agreements, for resilience, nation, asset directly, and how is contractual policies and conditions of private office are able to delay obligations, plus equal to the trouble value claims. Infrastructure may be used on necessary ability operators delay, but not also delay payout by the ATF earnouts from job potential activities for labor spread is repair and maximize. Payout finally offer easy way to recover. Only pricing enables proactive repair and incentivizes cleaner production regulatory solutions or shell game to death. Leahy 25. ELT opportunity for just companies that were navigating so shelf corporations usually have the group funding enable governments to clean up efficiently. Both the deposit and refund are key. Subsidizing prolonged referral and riskier investments. ASN 21. Proposal using public funds cover closures of digital precedent. The term remediation and subsidy industry will put us like giving it was large amount of funds. Reimburse companies to also disposed by salary and closure public spend replace farm spending rather than incentivize producers to make departments and technological to delay operatives and companies the bill no social problems with moral hazard to incentivize operational grant and social shoulder obligations and also operatives to the funds for money into usually language only creates new liabilities and delays. Advantage 2 systemic risk, fiscal and transition risk. Force fossil fuels to retire earlier, accelerate repair liability due to early retirements, bankruptcy of the fossil fuel industry. Lockman 25. Repeal laws match capitalism with the article of climate change, which not affect countries of here, no policies, possible to renewable and innovation, non-technology, they show no signs of slowing. It's an enormous amount of social industry that numbers are around period cost of this like the boss liability bank the fossil fuel industry companies of procures often climate change proposes about it that their period is sound transition that is cycle decline large producers. Numerous of these problems are sent aligned insurance and fiscal how to be more efficient after ratchet fire industry becomes less. The fact of how tools are they fail when they are most needed. Oil and gas majors will suddenly and unpredictably be faced with liability costs 7 times their expectations. So small owners go under joint and several liability requires the last solvent operator in ownership chain to pay should work at L22. Current financial insurance regime, no less than joint several liability of the company can run play costs to decommission all animals and make well known operators of marginal racing. Risk will be a bit awkward the gas decommission will have the joint several aspects of it involved in future marginal risk because 8 times spend so liability more than 3 quarters of liability setting companies or companies still left assets and when it's joint several assets long going therefore DOI should be also class flowing this would reduce condition exposures launch operators with chaotic liability cascades. Stranded liabilities create financial contagion. Rogers and Sugar 23 transition has massive liabilities irresponsible company early trend assets losing value. Fall below zero assumption of certain impact are AROs, liabilities, valuations far below zero, but so ARO make possible America's not about accelerated retirements, impact cash flows. Unfunded obligations make impact least financially viable companies result in contagion. It totals to $100 trillion in losses. Benham 23. Mitri economic condition have early resilient $100 trillion in assets across financial markets. The paper effect clear obvious sanctions corporations no asset values to be under regulators, countries rising quickly may start resemble financial markets. Shifts in the speed of transmission transitions to spend a comfort positive change of avoiding negative ones. Mass massive estimates that we violate increased physical conditioning of the actually more quickly into liability so transfers follow short letters of markets and operators or methodologically split loopholes introducing him to game the IROs, parallel head investment production longer pictures we want to essentially assassinizing risk marginal compensation. Another financial collapse causes World War III and terrorism. Lou 18. Another crisis could be even more severe because all started drugs academic medications were just from the specific environmental policies related to civil economy consequences. Could extend far beyond economy and public entity for terrorism, inequality, high levels of risk factors, showing social arrest and diplomatic intentions, including tax resumption, migration crisis, marginalization, nationalism, term to return place, multilateralism, increasing terms, escalation policies against the crisis, global conflagration. It goes global and existential. Costantino 23 traumatized. Faction would have to complement survivalist regulatory power, exposition, agriculture has to increase by weapons, or more likely to be used to large state control humanity, unless it would respond to astronomical modern societies to determine velocity. There will be no escape from a global collapse and collapse what could be one too many. Earnouts prevent the collapse of the fossil fuel industry. Deposits. This incentivizes damaging behaviors that increase transition risk while eliminating complicated liability schemes, using bonds to ensure sufficient funds to pay for repair. Lockman 25. Energy transition demands a new model for liability belonging on the sugar first laws, transition to financial candy, but liabilities and rules financial insurance company and would benefits until operators and failure repair obligations regular hold back profits and electric activities. And an ETF ensure the profits owners who claim repair this exceed the cost of repair operators to payment and earnouts would eliminate the liability. Certainty and transparency are key. Opaque liability and accounting creates black swans that show off financial system. Roachers ensure 23. Opaque RO accounting obscure studies also potential rapidly as market black swan with which human harm reported errors, specific problems, errors, profile factions, so the cost of kind of make it impossible for markets to evaluate a potential impact. Only market solve tradable bonds for earnouts rights creates an incentive for disclosure and monitoring. Limbo 21. While paying the bond to challenge liquidity analysts often pass out interesting about a challenging liquidity for instance the bond receives something level. A return that concern is not investors in market for a neutral market-based mechanism attack the information burden out of the public putting it on markets market reform. Price discovery future emissions from educated market modeling systems funding. Now the plan, the United States federal government should implement an environmental earnout financial assurance regime for fossil fuel asset retirement obligations. That's it. Actually 20. Wait, let me keep going. You have a card? I can read sustainability. Growth is sustainable, Smith 23. If you get this one against companies possible, assure reliance on past process, which will be fallacy. Countries have decoupled the growth of carbon emissions. This is absolutely decoupling offshore emissions have already peaked. With this reality, decoupled claim cannot have a fast growth continue until years after Aaron has already succeeded with responsible various resources are used altogether scientifically incoherent. I'll send that out.
We can start on this time.
Yeah. You sent it? Yeah.
He's right behind you. If you want to
Oh, that's
I'll
way
see.
easier.
Yeah. I'm just.
There is a. Oh, it's from that.
On my side too.
It's done.
Good.
Yeah.
The Lockman evidence on the second advantage, does the earnout, like, is the earnout more than the original cost to the, like, damage? Like, your evidence says,
Well-
or just explain that portion, pull back some profits, but then they get net profits after they clean up?
It's not net profits from the government. They pay an earnout based on how much repair is necessary or maintenance, and it's based off a calculation of their asset retirement obligations. They don't get all of that back. Leah, correct me if I'm wrong, but it's the money that's not used for cleanup.
Well, the evidence says that regulator would hold back profits, so that's the first part, and then they would return those profits when they've completed the repair. I follow that, and then the next line says these would not just cover, but substantially exceed the cost of repair. So they do receive a quote net payment. Like, what is that?
Well,
portion?
the net payment comes because of the overall inflation of money over time. The money from the tax goes to an environmental trust fund. And that's what our lock-in evidence describes as environmental assurance. This is the money from the tax, and
I guess,
then
does the
that money.
plan think that it like phases out the oil and gas industry, or long term, like it would increase profitability?
It has no claim on whether or not it phases out the oil and gas industry. It does mitigate the environmental impact of the oil and gas industry because it taxes the leaks that are like the leaks that come from wells, pipelines, as well as offshore rigs.
Okay, what does the AF do to do the environmental repairs? Is it like, is there a specific standard that you would abide by? Like, what does it do to solve existing methane
Yeah,
that's been released?
Our
etc.?
Lockman card says it's based on the amount of land near a well. Lockman says that that's a good indication
Wait, the
of
amount of
how
what?
much the leak is and how much the tax should be correlated with, and then based off that, it's like a normal tax based on leaks.
Okay, but like, for example, to solve oil spills, like what would the app do to prevent that?
The app does not solve oil spills. It creates a market-based incentive to improve infrastructure for oil rigs such that oil spills are extremely unlikely to happen.
Sure. The Eisen evidence, I'm confused with the warrant for deposit and refund. Can you just explain?
If there's no refund, then companies will just delay their obligations, which is the first part of the
But if
NDT.
they're just-
Or they'll
If
invest.
deposit.
If they're just
Oh, yeah,
taxed,
there's no deposit.
if they're just taxed in the first place, and that forces them to internalize pollution costs, why is the latter portion necessary?
Yeah, our locking card says they'll either, there's three mechanisms. One,
So, sorry, really quickly, a tax is just what the liability scheme does in the status quo. It's extremely unpredictable because it results in people paying a bunch of money but being completely unable to cover the repair cost. You need to refund because refund is the only way that they can actually fund the repair of the wells.
Okay, the part says that it would eliminate liability, what does that mean? Like, oil and gas companies are no longer liable because this is just the new system that's adopted?
no, it's a reform of the current liability system. The current scheme is very unpredictable, and it's joint and several liability, which means the last company that had ownership of a well is targeted.
Okay.
That would reform that process.
Okay, sense. Okay.
Yeah.
It's 10 off then in the case of Angela Ministry.
One second, read some extra.
We'll do this. 958. Is the panel good?
Wait a second.
It's opening and then I need to. Okay, I'm good.
One second.
Perfect.
Sure.
Are you?
It's just loading, but you can. But I'm good.
TMB market systems for the pressure quantity based instruments that force agents to internalize the cost of pollution page 9 and internalize the cost of naphtha subsidy voluntary agreements director R26 price based tax or leakage GG make activities and quantity based analysis of the individual distinct between price tax and quantity based quotas white 274 tax imposed to the charge subsidy importation is huge by domestic food or opportunity to internalize the cost of commission alternative and the other creation of market for tradable allows just limits voting additional aspects of the topic of political sectoral subjects and financial factors on the ground courtiers assume economic and political costs now minor administrative things they violate because actually Connor I don't know why they violate could you just think of it and tell me that. T substance. Decarbonization requires emission reduction across all sectors. We shall and must fall. 19. Decarbonization requires substitution of fuels regardless of the sector economy. It's usually intrinsically associated with energy policy must be throughout the economy fouler. 17. We define energy policy, commerce, and national energy planning. Any policy should abroad. Impact energy and overworking national energy policy that affect energy policy for the initial purpose limited focus not for the definition of bonus rights under ACA. Impact energy policy but are not energy policy but they violate because they're not throughout the economy. They just apply to fight fossil fuel assets. Live egg, one limit two. Line times first the next. Be prepared against hundreds of industries specific companies or geographic regions. 2. Ground courtiers require large change for the status quo and they try to like you do by letting for small as existing clean energy budget DA passes now. There's opposition to the 4-1 2 later so rally. Had budget reform and able the only way to move as quickly as possible to file the likely Trump push plan while reserve setting up a final bill that is a receptive MBS and political talk for and all 20 for the greatest topic is politician environmental policy led by for effective policy to make it visible and concentrated political penalty federal reform package and get terrorist increase political change is taking effect in the market system politically toxic Vatsky shipbuilding Shinokova 25 house budget invest 100 billion defense products as a base for stock mutation of shipbuilding Kasi to restore deterrence that's necessary to reserve Taiwan invasion but rescue 25 naval dominance of Beijing cannot Congo push the US Navy out of Beijing will make invasion of Taiwan certain China think it's from US ships to be as a select capacity China's capable of controlling the ASEAN Beijing design to Taiwan control the greatest sector to that anti-humanity eastern to the east using Taiwan PRC's fear of influence by the alliances and nuclear arms facing out of control the best go through nuclear North Korea able to take up a pit as they war CCP rallies central Taiwan government but at least try to find the world order of course counted by the United States federal judicial hold of the constitutional guarantees and then the environmental and introduction of Kamal's and applied to the environmental reduction financial insurance machine for fossil asset retirement obligation to compete to solve the case of contemplate kickstarts the judicial emission reduction framework that inaugurates binding legal obligations and is comparatively better than the case where like 21 judicial use injunction right emission remedies anything that lowers emissions appropriate under ESC court, enjoying the plans of admitting the issue of drugs and crash, which is just running from memory, council litigation, doctrine, injury in fact by giving energy right to reform the induction to reduce emissions through joining, and opposing attacks, veteran rebels, political question, doctrine, late 20, forwarding, beginning of for climate order, after you do adopt primary succeed to research, would exceed authorities, Juliana, significantly in air practice this year, particularly in instruction case of climate issue, works history, transfer, traditionally from back to PKD, still play a significant role, litigation to PKD weigh heavily in the US, overtaking the PKD press, internal cooperative defense contractors, Eisenberg time, contractor, friend, to the reason of PKD, university contractor, PKD to shield, reliability was the PKD will be a major factor in our litigation competition, therefore, classical movement for front, extinction, only judicial accountability, reigns in endless conflict, global 24, last contract, will way over global conflicts, running based on precedent, high tensions, and something like conflicts, in Asia, and Africa, every security challenges, US for arbitration, conflicts, for conflict resolution, financing policies that favor ourselves and defense, diplomacy, rock motive, and set of investigation, regardless of consequences, and all domestic encouraging, over Yemen, Israel, Mali, even the such as these up and work peace for generations, with greater greater stability, overcome it, cap it, it's assembly unsustainable, extinction, Dartmouth, Nuclear 23, 5 over death in DNA, background system, multiplied down profits, universal extinction, by dependence, that's what's the extinction, least construction, out there, CBS, that's created, not both, cabinet, 67, that's new complicated restoration because both profits and world leaders expand our rights to foster military produce military continue to reason spending altruism produce nuclear by biochemicals that are all external and fuel by capitalism MBS are ineffective at blocking capitalist growth the alternative democratic socialism that rejects the inevitability of market controls and Halford 23 transition necessary agreement with the world class human growth and skill down construction when the economic activity equal social degrowth founded on a solid critical market dismiss reliance on price and prior protector and effective market let us to a massive growth and also runs out the capitalist market is a marketization of economy self-limitation drive to condition growth here is a collective the growth system law market mantra of growth the growth build down ongoing planning and planning post capitalist market convert around market decision basket national basic out structure species no longer left to market safe by the 50th developments of national acquisition implemented non-environmental or non-financial financial assurance regime for possible asset retirement obligation disability utilitarian cloud component disabled life disposable corporate team. Extinction disability with an extra clean response to make claim about life not worth leaving in history that will distinguish worth about digital law exchange of resources and capacity to survive without threat and decision we need to make regarding with all useful purchase includes living offensive in the church of dignifying many question for with living policies with definition of personal life specific capacity that includes the life is generated through a history of formation political consumption energy profligacy life of living takes place with someone with knowledge generates extinction of early probable capacity and extinction of terminal being worth living to consider way less than we can do with the consumption of life or work especially in the dilemma or personality problem disability was the heart of extinction how is aligned with the certain lives that might have been justified with the exchange that enables life capacity alternative is disability justice Peter 22 the disability justice in global North must work to oppose debilitation. We even constantly wars, conflicts, and nuclear contagion. In reality, we are part of constant war in the constant advancement in the eventual perpetual war. Resistance must begin at rational level. Disability, justice, already fighting against MSC and navigating community safety, defense, and resistance. We located short door. MG, the oil DA, the United States federal government should remove terrorism one and after January 20, 2025 and ban the implementation of all future terrorists. Decarbonization guarantees Gulf State Club 12. 21. To effect on the decarbonization more visibly in the Gulf will fit this economy secured. The comments of the NDT region necessary to consider rapid oil price of $35. There is any economic geopolitical asset product of rise global economy should global government. Those specific economies of the people as subsidy. As that high oil price of active in 2030 price cost has been competition with the numerous existential security crisis and aside for 24 common food deciding around 2030 around side of logic and universality terms finances van world if you ever disavow mobilization matters even 2030 panel over figures used had to all not left hand no words French kind of nuclear mission power collaboration group competition how do you come in the absence of women's children is around destroyed in the disability survivors so oil group power politics global verification world movement 2030 fails make economy less stable than 2030 uphold global world of the worst outcome could be catastrophic society is heavily dependent on government no transition only low pressure force between clouds that triggers a Middle Eastern power vacuum 122 society heavily dependent upon revenue for around 85% of budget GDP by large event. Within 2030 came to a completely but we do 7% of oil we ran report to Saudi. In rapid dependent idea we are divorced from market Saudi so similar idea plan to go to church to the Saudis to believe there. Increase the production cheapest income from federal government even now he doesn't think demand is going down. Now the next day the Saudi government table cops have replaced democratic regimes so we place people take over exactly come out. Get set around baddies for us very bad for Israel. We should be worried definitely to government. The federal government should declare that foreign states that members of private sector may allow the attention of the United States to implement environmental or non-financial assurance regime for food asset. Retirement government should end up before the International Court of Justice about the obligation created by the Declaration to enforce the Declaration. That's obligated to solve that adopting a CEP or MAN 15 first applied law treaties additional basic unilateral and committed to government. Allow not one by states treaty requirements and enter legal agreement treaty must impose obligation binding on our allies was political women now like a civil treaty. Unilateral declaration no expression of consent to be banned. Strengthening the amount of commitments that have international law coordination problems surrogates. 18 climate change leading by collective action NDT demonstrating commitments to withdrawal. Comes on trauma and incentivize to withdrawal. But uncommon ruling to do political action now. So government's law would become relevant this NDT by force by the law treaties. Unilateral declaration while other physically commitments and there is no violence obligation grounded in unilateral action that the Legion Euro, which goes an escapable application of custom extinction. Learner 17 all of the Russian US possesses lots of Dukes, CHGs, and increased temperature experience of ideas second eye. Authorized no defense level leaking down no assumed to my strap must come Buddhist. Level that of earth robots and limited human super volcanoes astros supernova. Young race allowed to be global governance important challenge requiring national government for permission cultivation without their solution achieved only. If all the downward principles set the shape for hardline humans are more corporate before the solution cannot lie in national interest of Advantage 1. No fish was PSC, making the claim that common fish line was supposed to be security how they publish the last name part of the realization of it. ENS is not to the fish green trade rest of the good motive for patient on like the use military force again access to fish days. Over time, and all that violated is several circumstances. No dimensions in was fishing disputes at the no salad data shows warming increase the planet and has no effect on biodiversity. Gold County 21 public as there. German salad data the countries will become greater and more productive our farmers as vegetable life 40. 50% of vegetative area becomes greater due to deforestation. What is the water is sufficient to believe the 2% tree, but 2 million tam biosphere producing more planet of matter for all organisms will come more than 145 pieces of acceleration wishes with factor duration. Acceleration is international warming and directly contributing warming, special, 2 by warming, survival, and net beneficial plants 23. Data forming highlight like 40 degrees not extended waves are very hard to achieve 40 degrees Celsius, 3 degrees Celsius, very little chance of 40 degrees Celsius surprise. Those able to 5 degrees Celsius, about 5% likelihood. Similar to very slow 240 years for every meter we get out time, close to long the match building of our outlier, low likelihood do not choose by depth of time hydro. So some amount of depth if you have line is little about a stream, but the planet has some disaster negative effects over positive effects, June zone moving 20 kilometers. Each of humans live well, under conditions, alarming field dimension warming, alleviate suffering, negative and small over the reduction of climate, go for the wrong carbon. Enough carbs, long minimum gravity, migration, habit, restoration of reduced heat, affinity, temporary slowdown, decompression, because the warming, nothing to be afraid of. The risk is zero, assumes IPCC reports, scroll 23 comments. Is not warning us for Pablo's version of IPCC name 2. This is not among them shades of climate driving the space speed very low. Even as your slash most regional conversation security transmit progress welcome clear but not heading to worst case scenarios advantage 2. Decline doesn't cause war, world 20 and nothing economics impact war depression world thought there will be more. US 40 versus 20 wars most of the leaders of world war will be long and uncertain no matter. You can land not war unless quick achievement was the motivation security every war sort of random economics one factor and really you get Trump makes you kind of plan an upload G25 Trump prevalence in markets most of the worst opportunity to come Trump policy putting economy on track for recession. Zero crash this year looking to dodge unless somebody comes we get a further administration planning for government deployment not being card creating track labor market service center more job reason basic for fishing terrorist budget concerns and those that have progress from downturn driving US into recession. Okay. Another off. MBI puts a price on emissions, that's a tax or capture, they're not that. Moselle 10. MBI is defined to instrument that puts a price on emissions either via a tax or capture instrument like serving is not qualified. They violate that because they're an assurance mechanism, not a tax. Deposit refund, not a tax. The standards were the same as what were on the first off. Zero correlation between the kind of war. Allow 19. Scholars discuss correlation between cycle war fields provide procedural work can occur at any stage of expansion, crush, recession, recoveries, other reasons to wars. At any particular stage, research of foreign wars or future depression wars. Reason all stages of origin is downward pressure which may exist during recession or prosperity. Often current upturn causing optimism in many wars take place among countries where economies are slow again. Okay. I'm just gonna send the extra 2 cards that we're at. Good for crossword, right?
Yeah.
But yes.
Status of all
Conditional.
links, or actually no
I don't
links.
think
Any
we're
wanted
done.
to see voting issues?
Yeah,
Except T.
topicality. No, nothing other than T.
No race back or nuance.
No, it's this.
Net benefits to process or all just internals?
No, the net benefit to courts is also politics.
Okay.
I don't think the net benefit to unilateral declarations is anything other than the internal net benefit.
And is the reason for courts and politics just agent based?
That is the reason as a dependency. Yeah, I guess we can make more arguments, but. that's
Okay. You skipped EPA to SAT, DNAT, and HVAC. Anything else?
all. Skipped anything else? I don't think so. No, I like no obvious, pretty sure.
Okay. You've read 2 definitions of MBI.
Yeah, you scratched the
One-
first one, the Moselle one, the one.
Okay, we got that.
Yeah.
Cool. Moselle, what's the violation of that?
The refund portion of the AF is not a tax or cap and trade. We think.
Okay, the topic says including an MBI. You have not read a definition of including. Can we agree that your topicality argument?
Well, there are other
Otherwise,
violations. I mean, I think that the
what's
mandate
the
of the
other
plan, the
violation?
mandate of the plan is not necessarily a tax. I mean, that's the way you
Why?
explained it.
Explain.
Environmental earnout financial assurance regime for fossil asset retirement obligations isn't necessarily a
Conrad's
tax.
multiple times we explained it as a tax.
Yeah, you can explain it a certain way, but if your evidence that the plan text definitionally is not a tax, then
And
that's not
why
a
do you
tax.
think it's not a tax?
Well, we think that environmental earnout financial assurance regime is not necessarily a tax.
You're
We
just
can read
saying that,
definitions
but
of those
You
words.
just say that over and
A
over.
potential
You need one
interpretation of
reason.
this plan text that is not a tax is that it gives subsidies to fossil fuel companies because that's financial assurance
That's
for fossil fuel
impossible.
assets.
That's not the definition of environmental.
Exactly. We could define those words and have a debate about what the
Okay.
words in the plan mean.
Okay, sure.
It's not necessarily a tax.
The cap K, would it get rid of all markets?
Yes, it gets rid of the idea, the logic of markets. It nationalizes industry.
Does it nationalize the grid? Or like what industries would it nationalize?
Well, like it nationalizes industry, which is like
energy production, agriculture, transportation, the grid, yes. It nationalizes like industry as a overarching.
For this debate, like it seems like the only relevant question is the oil and gas
Yeah,
industry.
like
So, like,
it
yeah,
nationalizes the
largely
oil and gas
depends on-
industry, which we think
Depends
is
on what the 2AC describes the plan to
Okay,
be.
Unilateral counterplan excludes the words adopting a CEP. What's the alternative to CEP?
what do you mean alternative?
Well, like the first word you read is like it solves without adopting
Yes.
clean energy policy.
Yes.
What terms of art have you used that's not?
Well,
clean
we
energy
haven't
policy?
obviously have not read the do the counterplan block. We will define those words to require the force of law in a way that the counterplan does not.
Okay.
So like it doesn't adopt a clean energy policy. It does something similar that solves the case
Does it
without
just-
using the force of law.
Does it ask the ICJ to do the plan and then does the plan after?
It's not necessarily like consult. It binds itself to international agreements and then
Do you feel out the result of that?
no. We need to win. ICJ says yes.
Courts, do you also feel out the result or no?
What results?
Like you know.
No, not really. I mean, it's the courts do the plan. The courts
Okay,
constitutionally.
the Politics Society piloted each part to be like 7 words. Where do you think you've read anything that PC's key?
More than 7. I mean, our lead
Yeah,
evidence
nice,
pretty
nice.
clearly says that Trump needs to push the plan. Trump needs
Wait,
to push
which part says that?
Lee for one. It would fall to Johnson and likely Trump to push the plan.
Let me pull out a plan. Okay, 9. Where's that standard?
Here.
Oh. Do you mind?
Yeah.
Is everyone good for an order?
Yeah.
Okay, the order is TMDI, T subsets, the states counterplan, the cap K, disability K, unilateral declaration, courts counterplan, and the politics Assad, and the oil Assad. Yes, TMBI. Sorry, I forgot about the app. It's environment advantage first, systemic risk, TMBI, T subsets, states counterplan, cap K, disability K, unilateral declaration, courts counterplan, politics Assad, oil Assad.
We're good whenever.
Yes, article. Panel?
1 and
Basic one, yes, fish shortages and food shortages cause extinction. Fish resources are critical to global economies. Historical analysis proves decline in fish industry decreases the risk of conflict or defense. Doesn't assume trigger points like China, Russian abilities. Now that's clear evidence 1 and C2. Yes, extinction ecological systems are highly coupled with social technological phenomena and reinforcing feedback loops. You cannot predict, even if some resources are substitutable. It's impossible to know when one threat to an ecosystem can cross invisible tipping points for death spirals. So minimizing threats is key. That's fear 1 C3. Yes, warming causes extinction. Hot house melts the Arctic, sea level rise, weather extremes wipe out humanity. Even if that doesn't kill the cumulative impacts of infrastructure collapse, food insecurity, migrations, overwhelm adaptation. That's fairness 1 and Z. That's fairness. The next advantage 1. Financial collapse causes extinction. The world is dealing with increasingly intense trigger points, inequality, social unrest, diplomatic tension, migration crisis, polarization, nationalism, isolationism, and proxy wars. Next, economic crisis and financial collapse breaks down institutional levers necessary to keep things at bay. That confluence triggers a nuclear war. That's the evidence. No, all evidence is wrong. 1 trigger points about now make it unique, increase the risk of poly crisis. That's the evidence. 2nd, about recessions, not systemic risk. The latter takes out the buffers. To the former 1 and C2 and 3 Travis herd growth, not systemic risk. AROs crash critical buffers to our economy, crashing banks and insurance. That's the backbone of healthcare, food, electricity, water, and civilizational operation, which means our impact is still unique. TMBI 1, we meet A, aeronautics include tax on potential pollution and refined pollution does not occur. B, the difference between how much is deposited and refined is a carbon tax. Line 21, the gap is expected social cost of carbon does over time expected damage of friendly emissions tax. The same as the emissions tax. Second, MBIs include insurance bonds in addition to taxes and tradable permits there. Kaiser 11, the turn towards market-based instruments and environmental laws focus on on pollution taxes and tradable permits. The third market-based instrument, the assurance bond, where available information is uncertain, is attractive, is thus serious economic for hard assurance. Bonding marshals power of the markets. 3F, innovation, upstream carbon tax and cap and trade is tiny steel topic that discourages spread of research for functional limits. Then I guess states econ and the cap those clean housing and small house 5 arbitrariness, though consensus in the literature most else in this context arbitrary definitions and currency over substantive terms clash because the net can always limit out the F6 reachability, but F of our topic is functional competing interpretations cause a race to the smallest topics. Now T subsets 1 we meet A, the F covers all energy production, it makes the entire economy less carbonized. 4 B is energy policy is action and inaction between those. Plan covers the whole economy. 0 and 4 what is energy policy? Policy is response to the government's circumstances and choice to maintain or positive change positive action for maintenance of the screw. Second, energy policy for decarb target sectors. Capano idle 22 intersection of climate energy policy means use of targeted instruments remains important. These include sector emission reduction targets for caps and site tech specific regs. 3 decarb is the process of emissions reduction. Dolsky et al. 22 decarb contains D in the sense of down, refers to a process that aims to control carbon. Definitions often cited comes from the IPCC, substitute all activities named to economy that means all little all processes in which the CO2 intensive processes are replaced by low CO2 processes. 4 app innovation pays 1% less counterbalance impossible fiat 0 most MBI since they allow market destruction outweighs and guys progression of class tech and predictability. Our evidence cites IPCC definitions from here in the field and energy policy bans pricing non-energy sectors, so we can't be obligated to decarbonize the zero stakes restability process apply from above. States counterbalance 1 do the counterbalance second do both. States funding can provide a backstop to where operators are insolvent. 3 doesn't solve leaks BLM leases caused methane falls and devastating energy security. Those are on federal lands. 4 offshore development is on federal lands. 5 midstream and downstream AROs get preempted and 6 states and counterbalance are illegitimate. Doesn't meet the voter rejoinder voter for fairness. 7 is uniform fiat is bound not grounded in literature and discouraged research means you can get set a low threshold for preemption. 8 links to the benefits because politics are response and lobbying. Cap K when links them must plead to the plan. They can be about ideology informing marketing mechanisms, not random reps on the money. See self-critical education but avoids pictures reverse basis. A fair game also must have a single actor in action. Anything else justifies sandbagging world peace also are impossible to debate to it all does not mutually suited with the plan so current satisfies our framework. App isn't just at harnessing markets to drive technological innovation is better than abandoning commodification. The all causes backlash and transition wars and flips the environmental impact also 21 pre-modern societies experiencing scarcity, competitive emissions, industrial stabilized temperatures, limiting warming will require industrial society for change. Overlooks the lack of public consent. The plan is limited to grow and making military advantage checks all problems are through and bio the key like capitalism, affluence enable most material identities. Hobby farming, collapsing economy, ledgers, rivals, values, and violence, retreating from the economy, slowing innovation without trade scarcity, that's really winning your warfare. There has not been nuclear change, vindicated, optimistic reading side. Having conditionalities about a choice for choice, each choice, the choice never been best, and the best counterplan answers because they create no cost for the option. For the negative, you can only hurt the affirmed on other pages that disincentivize in-depth counterplans, research, and clash on both sides, destroying education, expenditures, choice, each choice you can get will be per.
What is the red growth? This system.
What is red growth is sustainable per confluence conditionality is voter. Disability K, cross-apply framework second, do both 3 alphas it is at 4 efficient market policies are super real political negotiation. The alternative utopian is apolitical and result in networks with disability care. Watson 93 will not suffice to demand more service and organization taking the position that we should all get as much as we care as we desire puts organization outside the realm of real political negotiation. The only answer is to propose means of change disability groups needing to speak to the language of cost containment, manage competition, and organize systems of care while containing overall healthcare costs. It makes sense to design organized delivery system. This is not utopian enterprise, but they need to learn about alternatives to ensure they meet their needs better than a managed fee or service from medicine. Disability groups must become much more active in their debate by participating and framing their message to obtain media coverage. Disability organizations can use constructions and constituencies to support healthcare reform. Unilateral declaration. Counterplan 1 delay quickly creates assets in disrepair causing methane leaks. Catastrophic catastrophic oil spills and land poisoning that's locked in and Q-SNES second. Adding uncertainty to AR disclosure directly triggers financial instability. Steel 24, uncertainty impacts safety and soundness. Financial institutions threaten the stability of systems. Uncertainty interferes grinding financial activity to a halt. 3, do the counterplan, then the adopted plans are earnouts. It's not intrinsic because it adds the timeline of the counterplan's process. Doesn't sever because it mandates the plan and should doesn't mean immediate elevage. 20, future uses of should expose the vice the speaker thinks it's a good idea. We're talking about any action in future patterns that we should and present tense verbs. Present tense verb 4, do both. 5, say no. 6, do the counterplan. 7, do the counterplan and the plan over do the plan and the counterplan over something else. Applying the counterplan's action to a new object is limited and test remain opportunity costs. It is no internal certainty. The present can withdraw, which hurts business planning, and it's non-binding because which means it devastates certainty and the rule of law. The court's counterplan. 1, perm, do the counterplan. 2, it links the net benefit. 3, do the plan and issue a ruling on the basis that standing does not require injury. In fact, as defined in Lujuan, even if they defeat our other perms, this one perms the reasoning the court would give in doing the counterplan by law 18 prior to the 90s of our own gas enjoy broader view standing. But with injury, in fact, standard standing has become hurdle. Lujuan affirmed injury, in fact, a stricter standard that the defendant directly affects the handful of personal interest to not attenuate interest diffusely defined perm. Do the counterplan, then the plan links the politics, cost attention, includes MPS. Courts can't calibrate climate policy or establish national policies crime at all. 10 courts cannot design carbon injunctions, cannot intelligently calibrate taxes. Decision by federal court does not establish national emissions policy. Courts inability renders judicial relief a conceptual methodological mismatch that with climate change requires courts of judicially manageable standards. Courts incapable of binding or binding anyone other than litigants before them. Politics dissent. 1, dissent is an intrinsic logical policymaker can do both. 2, no link. The F is the DOI. Their cards for 7 words. Gets warrants new at 1 of your answers. 1 of your answers. 3, Trump is politically fucked. Plim iron. 4, 2, Trump's terrorist comment. His White House is facing really a double Judah laws and guns and use of signals to spawn investigation, magna luminaries, scrutinize deportation, taxes, consumer prices are falling, failing, fears of recession are rising. His close allies are acknowledging of President Knockoff. His the most challenging of this term was not getting a United Republican front bunch. Trump has spent a lot of PC reps. We'll see it as good. If he can deliver tax cuts, but recession and inflation are politically devastating. Trump is risking both. 4, it's not liability regimes never really cause legal fights. That's Lockman. 5, PC fails Ferris. 1223, the question whether he will get anything given his name no status, emerging fissures and coalition cracking weeks before even sworn in. Trump has shown disastrous effects. Instincts wasting PC on absurd choices. The idea that Trump would come with battle ready staff has run headlong into reality. MAGA have no earthly idea how to build power. It has been amateur hour for months. Mutiny is growing. 60 half is popular. Reliance businesses and regulator incentives and remove liability. That's Lockman. Can you do more policies? Okay. 0 chance of breach and Trump ignores it anyways. Rivals 114, given the nature of showdown's agreement won't come into till the last minute and with annual deficit and the $2 trillion the U.S. bombing grid, the increased limit in 2026. Fundamentally, these are political theater. The chance of Congress allowing defaults are 0, and the off chance funds did run out. It would prioritize debt to can follow. The president can invoke the 14th to ignore the ceiling. Trump demands to get rid of the debt ceiling. Mean we can roll this out. No. Time 1 more, too many obstacles. She is risk averse. Roy 424 war against Taiwan is hardly compelling. Beijing is nowhere near superiority that would guarantee invasion would or would disrupt economic activity, threatening millions of Chinese turmoil. Could endanger Xi's blockade with the anti-China cooperation sanctions. She has huge project restoring primacy of the party. Mark at party. Go to the oil discount. 1, prices are in free fall, independent from tariffs. Palantir 4, 3, oil prices sharply drop with tariffs out of the market. So signs of loosening reductions in oil rates tend to be negative for prices. IPI and EIA reported unexpected prices of inventories and planks lacking demand. Considering bearish, the U.S. will impose an additional duty on all imports of guaranteed and to advance oil output X, accelerating their hike. WOJ is moving downwards. We will offer bearish outlook. Second upstream carbon taxes reduce total exporting costs, increasing global prices. Makusu, not all 18 all modes show decrease in exports for EITE tax induces a change in industry output, expanding output towards the sector with low intensity tech reduces demand for domestic goods. The carbon price adder increases producer price of EIT, resulting in reducing exports. All the demand decreases, higher export price leads to higher value. 3, no link bonds. Our investments, not cost deposits, are put into a trust fund that generates firms profits for cleanup. That's Lemoyne.
I'll send those.
Yeah, if you could send all the cards.
Yeah.
Okay, are you good for cross-outs?
Yeah.
How can the AF be the Department of the Interior and be attacked?
The AF can be the Department of Interior because it enforces a charge. Like, we would say it's functionally the same as a tax.
Okay,
we
so,
do not.
so the AF is a charge. Is that accurate?
It's a charge that requires companies to deposit a certain amount from their profits. The DOI retains those charges in environmental.
Okay, so it is not a tax in that Congress has the ultimate authority to tax and spend. Is that accurate?
Sure.
Okay.
We will say that it is functionally equivalent to a tax.
I
If
agree.
your claim on
I-
T that tax must be literally saying the words tax, then that's
Yeah, okay,
extremely
that
bad.
makes sense.
And your card doesn't say that.
It does.
It says
The
such
oil
as.
DA, the
It says such
Pantelides,
as and in this
the
context.
Pantelides evidence, the one part that actually says that oil prices drop is about tariffs. The rest of the card is just listing a bunch of things that happened lately. Where does it say that those things produce?
No, it also
oil
says
prices?
OPEC floods. The reason why OPEC is flooded is just because there's secular reasons why, like, there are internal conflicts between OPEC right now that are causing people
Where does
to
it
flood.
tie a decline in oil prices to something other than tariffs?
Again, OPEC flood is something that is external from
But
tariffs.
it doesn't. Yes, but it doesn't say that that is decreasing oil prices. Yes.
Well, okay, so
it says
if
that
you
when
flood the market with oil, what do you think happens to
I
oil
agree that
prices?
the
You think
card
they
says
go
it.
up?
It doesn't. You didn't
Like,
have
this is
that
basic
line.
supply and
The
demand.
Moncaluso evidence, where does it talk about oil prices? It's about export value, not about
Sorry,
commodity pricing.
I don't know if I included this when I cut the card, but EITE it's about oil.
What?
Like that
EITE
acronym.
stands for emissions intensive and trade exposed, which is a type
Yeah.
of industry that is
Sorry.
emissions intensive and trade exposed, not
You
about
can
oil
go
prices.
to the abstract of this article. When it defines EITE,
Okay.
it includes natural gas, oil, and I believe coal.
But the parts of this card that you cut and read is like taxing carbon will increase the output of the industries that you're taxing. Why does that mean that it would increase global oil prices?
Sorry, it does not increase the output, it increases the producer price of EITE.
Okay,
If you increase the cost
Oil-
of producing oil in the United States, that constrains the amount of oil supply that is in the global economy.
where does your
That
evidence say
means
this?
that
It
oil
doesn't say
prices-
any of this. It
Okay,
doesn't say
so-
any of this.
I guess, do you understand that when you constrain
I
supply,
understand
the
economics,
price
yes,
of
but
oil
your card does not
increases?
say any of this. Like
The
you
card
just-
says it constrains the supply of oil.
No, it doesn't. It doesn't say oil.
It says, okay, adder increases the producer price of EITE, resulting in reducing exports. What?
So the app would reduce exports of U.S. oil and
Yes.
that would increase global oil prices.
Yes.
Okay, I gotcha. Okay, I just prefer that.
I think I was just like shining on my computer screen, I can see. How's NDT doing? Having fun? Doing well? Gonzaga, having fun? Like easy for you to be here, right?
I go to school in Boston, so it's a bit of a,
Yeah.
bit of a trip.
Where do you go?
Tufts.
That's where I went to school.
Really?
I just graduated undergrad there last year.
Oh, congrats.
You in grad students?
Yeah, I do the philosophy program.
So you're on the Medford campus?
Mm-hmm. What did you study?
International relations and Chinese.
And you're at Harvard now?
I work for Harvard, but I live in DC. I'm like a cybersecurity researcher. So Emory, Miss Disclosed to Harvard. They sent us a doc and then read it.
I'll change mine based on my
What?
ticket.
So,
This room?
yeah.
Or just yeah, okay.
Which, like,
GH.
oh, wow.
They're all like specific.
Do you wanna know what's funny, GH, actually, they were misdisclosed too last round and round of it.
Did you-
And then also-
Did you vote them for them on misdisclosure?
Well, they didn't really go for misdisclosure, the app ended up going on the,
Okay.
yeah.
Wait, how can you misdisclose and then go for theory? Like,
They said that because, so the app was Navy, and, they misdisclosed the plan text. But I think like the rest of it was fine, but it was like a plan text issue, and then in the response to disclosure, they were like, we should structure disadvantaged bid teams. So then, when they extended the disclosure reason, they're like, the reason that they should have infinite commission, they were like, no, that's the terms. It was.
yeah, we'll see how yes adapts to misdisclosure.
What?
No.
Was it, like, I assume it was an old app and not like
So they said-
accidentally a different one.
No, they sent it was carbon tax, but they sent a one advantage version and then they read a different advantage. And so that obviously weren't prepping against them. They didn't tell us they were gonna read. Slack's going on. The code is Slack in the background is very
I assume that's just like slapping a technical in a
Yeah,
hurry.
yeah.
That's what I was thinking
That's-
too.
Is it India?
Yeah, it's just around.
Can we even go there?
I don't know.
There is a bathroom back there.
Okay, I'd say no if I could go.
I'm sending
Still
it.
has
I'll stop. I'm sending it.
Yeah. I mean, thank God we also have some impact defense to the scenario, so it's not like the end of the world, but.
What, Emory?
Yeah, Emory disclosed the wrong.
Disclosed wrong?
Yeah, like sent us one doc and read a different one, I see.
No, that's tough.
So.
I assumed y'all were just gonna do LD stuff, like the
See,
scap.
everyone says this, but we've only ever gone for LD stuff like twice.
You went for it against.
Yeah,
us.
we went for it against 2 first-round teams, and it's DS, they're not like a first-round team.
Well, yeah, but Emory's the first round, like,
Oh, yeah, that's true. There is some LD stuff in one.
yeah, I mean, Rishi was just going off on like Canadian oil imports or something or another, and we were like, okay, I guess it's not LD.
They got 3 out very quickly in Devils of Texas, which did help a little bit. Jim and I have been trying to
Going
slowly
away. Yeah, yeah,
claw
yeah.
back at like,
Where they
please,
made it.
substance and like real things, educational. Well, more than,
Yeah,
you
yeah.
know. But somehow I ended up in a moral skep and Kant round last
I'm so
round.
sorry.
And just because I coach the team doesn't mean I enjoy it. I just happen to coach them and they want to read it despite my judgment. And so. Turner looked very sad last round.
But who wasn't?
It was Fullerton MM.
Oh, they were doing the.
Yeah.
Scams? Yeah.
Sorry.
There you go.
The order is the critique, or the cap critique, cap K, advantage 1, advantage 2.
Cap, advantage 1, advantage 2. I haven't gotten it yet. Okay.
Everyone good?
Capitalism is unsustainable. 1. Planetary boundaries, endless privatizes the environment, triggering systemic collapse like biodiversity loss, resource shortages, and climate change that stir. 2. Militarism that drives excessive military spending and resource wars that cause nuclear, biological, chemical, and cyber war that stir all existential. It causes deliberate first strike. Extinction number 23. War risk, extinction, new global restriction, China, out of control, U.S. new policy, big first strike, prolonged elimination of arms agreement, cabinet, U.S. developed power, hedge, establishing econ dominance, extinction, new course solutions for first strike, capital standard, church, profit, factors, eligible reliance on first strike, trade annihilation, framework. We meet, we have a single actor, the framework, counter interpretation, evaluate.
My bad.
Framework, the night can win by distributing the economic theory or proposing a better alternative. Prefer it. 1. Knowledge production. DL is delusion that accumulates dominant ideologies. Feature 23. Major low factor learning game of policy. Insecurity. What is there all the situations of policy must be violent to game. We can persuade the legitimation of prevailing power rather than account promotion. The final ultimate impediment to realizing the position of yield of hedges. Fear of speed. Low extra. There's no possible advantage. Challenges the hedge. Better control for scholarship. Its conditions and possibilities. 2. Is market logic. Spend and focus. Nationalizes business as usual to preclude alternative ideology. Long Cooper 25. Traditions dominant orthodox, heterodox, and corporate externalities. Market focus. BAU calling for acknowledging dominance. Policy and economic spaces. Go beyond neo-classical orthodox side for wide policy and corporate associations. Mars. Paganism and nationalization of turn present the idea that everything is reducible to market, begin with conceptual discussion of market question. Fairness, we solve asking the plan, we just get ideology or app choice solves that they think the money see fielding. The is reciprocal or impacts outweigh for internally. The only pick today is scholarship. 3. We turn it. Comes more fair, be a widespread inequality of workers' situation. If active, they can separate MBIs that are worse for Afghan, inclusive and focus. Encourages wordplay, prosecutor ways a nuisance. T argument, next flex outweighs MBS, that is a functional limit, you should lose. If you cannot defend them, clash, our model solves better, the advocates defense of
Their economic model framework is impacting play focus, clash inevitable, little active line happens regardless, and zero fairness. Because education is far more important than the theory argument. We have a single actor, i.e. the government, adopting a planned economy, which is also single action, so this is not offense. If they blow it up, then we obviously get new answers. That's not stand back your world peace alternative, so no offense. Permutation do both fails. One, ideological, that's framework. Second, mutual exclusivity, that all built on a critique of MBIs and explicit alternative to the market, which is one of each smelter. There are distinct economic policies. Opposite 24. Socialism is negation alternative to captive production, organizing economic market coordinated with divisible hand clears and co-ownership production under social democratic control typical market. Private falls outside of competing balances so they cannot be combined. The 22 economies not how they can be combined. Detecting the principles of organization market and playing so each other non-neutral instruments used are constantly trusted that distinct structures freeze corruption of purpose market socialism that fails. The 22 any market economy and capital and democratic organization surplus come private hands as long as market subsist logic capital govern the public. The limited effect evaluate firms through offense defense or some benefit including MBIs is only a risk it ruins the alternative. 4 severance MBIs hand decision making to private entities the alt removes that pure. 11 MBIs are flexibility centers voluntary conscious CNC which are not market MBIs data decision making private actors combined with CNC by state CEPs are legally binding. 20 actions implement CEP legally binding programs need to be statutory requirements rejected as no age for conscious now because the alternative bans the plan. Now the next argument is abs the DA obviously not. They did not contextualize why the alternative cannot solve financial collapse or any of the other resource-based impacts like the environment, which obviously Cap turns it, but Carlson says it requires negative emissions. The plan does not create those, but capitalist innovation is peaking very human 24 decline opportunity for 5% every year. Sufficient decrease in breakthrough innovations within our saving existing systems of declining innovation not reward our resources. This is research property defense to do incentives for low impact research put away breakthrough increasing paper slips here. New idea loss in the relevant part breaking and innovation like allow authors to move possible to conduct MIN LLM several years like sales reduce expenditure research. Invest in published legislating state many papers believe the same conversation outlook. If your security elevator rewards not boosting or current efficiency to diminish humanity's challenge this significant innovation and we solve it better. The 22 corporation trust coordination where the market fully innovation reduces pollution. Features wide horizon democratic socialism industrial innovation networks collaborate we fund democratic R&D expand opportunities for entrepreneurship. Ventures get finance from public by reducing impediments to innovation by current VCs are really high return socialized enterprises. Thus, both entrepreneurship improved by social by the money. The things that they reference in the evidence like DimBio and SRL we will impact turn biotech advancements create bioorganization that outweighs opportunity for biotechnology exploit biological processes for industrial purposes related to synthetic and cheeky CRISPR. They can tinker or design new existing pathogens, modify or use and agriculture with high virulence resistant vaccines, cars carrying insect benefit disease. This involves Moore's law for prediction. Because of increasing length of infrastructure that are unstable results in black swan and SRL fails and increases warming. Extinction over 24. Capitalist elites pressure to turn SRL and developing the SRL playing conflict we call relationships recited this rational civil require person to state cooperation, trust and transparency even falls. The results of complexities, technicalities, those combined diverse supply of structures, monsoons, and water seriously. The concepts involved information shock massive plus a warming resulting from build-up CO2, 2 degrees plus warming and dog if you guys recommend. The last portion about the evidence is about backlash, but it's specific to a collapsing economy, which is not the alternative because it's not a socialist revolution that overthrows the state because it's a planned economy that's government oriented, which avoids backlash. Over 23, renewed socialism appropriate the state's apparatus to define transitions, support stability, self-governance, avoid tendencies for the authoritarian channel state funding, legal protection, protect the capitalist socialist programs, revitalists, rural regions, seedbeds of regular populism, really socialist democracy, making regulating populism, but we saw every single year about McDonald's 18, declining power, bullshit, transparency, variety, environmental issues, power, focus on corporations, credibility, amplified adversaries, understanding, increasing the declining power, cutting, simplified challenges, fewer adversaries, capitalism missteps. Now, the link debate is conceded. 1, pay to pollute. This is pure capitalist ideology. Firms will sacrifice marginal costs now if they're assured more profits in the future, which is the premise of when you see constantly their profits are placed in a trust and the value exponentially increases, which means that they will just delay environmental repair to maximize the inflation of the trust. Second is calculation, relying on cover accounting. Further, accumulation justifies infinite growth. John Lap 23. Cover accounting is subject to the accuracy. Here, main principle framework info frequently withheld data from private companies. Here's the conservative collection cost of data responsibility to identify companies that show countries to challenges possible to liability, counting customer cover tax and seals. Essentially, community techniques to avoid liability, celebrating caps, EU, GMC not include raw materials related to to create bias, MIP not change per capital, illusion, risk, inevitability. Preserving with the green economy enables half-hearted mitigation streams. There's next question from counterinsurgency. There's a liability link. It obfuscates the root cause we face. Degradation worse. Understanding what litigation is due to particular corporations is possible assumption flawed because very structured capitals address competition because competition there's compulsion for social, taking material behavior, computers capital behaviorally asserted within entire system energies and access to vacuum over the wider particular corporations, the consequential of professional fiber bank using exon holding corporations accountable to seeing mass real drivers. There's no empirical decoupling, which is the Smith cost application. He's unqualified to speak. There's no statistics, but decoupling is impossible. 25 growth. Driving ecological harm positive linkages between GDP and emissions only have times emissions and right possessions that are next on a scale. Application basis financial feasibility, line availability, consumption of growth is likely to warming. Any claim must be absolutely global stand permanent effectiveness of time limited growing income for the countries to have achieved opposite company emissions. Showing that limits 835 orders for add of 30 now result in direction next to 36 include opposite company. Even less like in the future when solar based charges the materials that OERI, low gross new consider consistent with limit warming efficiency gains, offsetting consumption of J-bonds, which might reduce. Cities are the half US rebound effects 101% of total increase renewables being added by replacing emissions possible at the time. British going to detect alone not enough to were affected by degrowth and independently capitalism unsustainable from toxicity. Grantham 25. Toxicity major contributor collapse and construction review the development and predictions for fertility and effects. Amphibians declining passengers based food chains declining leaching class getting collapse ecosystem survival curve trends infertile in 28 years exit their collapse. globally capitalist terminally perf con is good, ideology which has seen the money remove the left and right, just conditionality, regardless when it seems consistent, they were even if statements that prove that the plan fails still under capitalism or framework does not nearly lose, so severance is irrelevant. The alternative solves the cases plan never had socialism, abolishes the market, and reorganize society away from the profit motive, utilizing command and control. They did not read a DH essential planning, only just towards the backlash above, so you should pursue 100% solvency, and actually now is preferable to the available class group. For now, democracy energy sits under control, more valuable, beneficial national healthcare, and UK right, US through latter and higher carbon for energy, democracy, more rapid, the goals come from nationalizing possible companies, bio costs, far less than subsidies or future climate cost companies, and related attraction because obligation shareholders probably making a shift on likely policy, popular while tax values for changes that will inevitable cap cannot reduce forever, exit will civilize or barbarous. Advantage 1, continuation capitalism guarantees biodiversity collapse, which turns the resource impacts and climate and biodiversity markets. 20, society's survival depends on ability to avert opinion, physical, biological, and initiative via sex, fashion, teachers, trade, capitalism, burning foundations, and economic goods, the food, and commodities, sustainability, life and death for all 7 billion, the foundation as well as bringing human trigger, local population declines, focus, species, overlootions, and population decline, building populations, range, creatures, much massive engines, by biodiversity, sugar by process, internal biosphere, destroying the ecology, by destroying wave, capitalism, extreme pollution, cause pollution, degradation, environmental destruction, advantageous dominance, he said, destroying the weather systems, pushing the future, to the 10 times higher, and resource wars are driven by imperial expansion, being 25, more shortages, more competition, raw materials, and global struggle, essential, the US imperial sport, from the world, US imperialism seeks domination, US efficiency, reliant on foreign diversity, and the must be ended by whatever means necessary, which definitely turns foodwards. Advantage 2, decline is peaceful, forwarding systems have not caused war, and most wars are unrelated to economic conditions, leaders turn in wars to resolve domestic conditions, and wars too costly ability to pursue, that's spoiled, and also is just as likely to cause war during growth, which is analysis of all 4 business cycles and concludes that it's fundamentally insignificant to assume that decline causes it, but it's unsustainable. Albert 24, deregulation, sustained demand, infrastructure, rely on financial levels to achieve growth, easy found money to speculation, feeling risk taking, there was not where scope 19 without reach 50% capital, unsustainable, and corporation, burger, profits, wages, those people can only get for real debt crisis, recession, late slop, structures that make challenging demand contradictions, and capitalism creates inevitable boom bust cycles that causes falling rates of profitability that makes class inevitable, but so good. 24, face of bottlenecks from rapidly increasing capital to maintaining production, the crash, overproduction process, the collapse, and inheritance of happens first to realize all anti-socialism, consequential fixtures, demand collapse, destroy full capital collapse, slander, speculation, back to the value beginning of cycle capital, disposed through degradation, destruction, TVRF, continuous development, brings decline of variables, code habits, include as TFRP, and they said that the internal link to systemic crises was things like growing nationalism, inequality, and was not to mind in the status quo, but growth makes all those things far worse. House 25, GDP does not improve well-being, is still in paradox, things like how it is related during GDP does not apply during increase global weight, social safety, commodity, increased satisfaction, white indicates show diminishing returns as GDP increases, and there's no conflict from econ declines data at L21, diversion theory of war, according to the leaders to be economics, to introduce proactive policies, and empirical studies have been able to find evidence to corroborate their mechanisms, and able to account for fairness, so shifting interactions, hinting that like how the effect of electrical hardship and conflict assumption of the theory not work has affected 1900 in a cross-national experiment, and systemic risk is just econ decline because the only impact of systemic risk is that countries escalate in times of decline.
We're gonna take priorities. We had 9. You good for cross?
Yeah.
Okay, the first impact that you read on this page is US first strike causes extinction. What causes US first strike?
The Durber evidence says the profit motive within the military-industrial complex and also U.S. imperialism.
Sorry. Okay.
The U.S.
Profit.
demonizes.
Profit motive. What profit does the US gain from first striking China?
It's about access to resources and the imperial drive
So,
to control
What
alternative
resources
threats, etc.
what resources does the US
Well,
want?
it's about economic dominance as well. So like the U.S. wants to be the global power that oversees the market structure, which causes them to initiate conflict against people they view as threats,
And
such
that
as Russia and
causes, so,
China.
let me get this clear. Because the US wants to be the global leader of the economy, they will nuke China, is your
In
argument.
U.S. economic dominance, expansion of nuke arsenal bases pushes for, quote, first strike. Like, it's very clear.
Bases
Line before
push
that,
for first
the
strike
line
because
before
of
that
US
says
dominance.
global capitalism meant that the U.S. developed enough
Okay.
military power to enable such an economic dominance.
What about the AF, causes economic dominance?
The AF commits to the ideology that free markets and growth are infinite, that it's possible to correct for those things, we think that that is that's the unsustainability portion.
Okay, the other thing that you've said here is ideologically, the US will, in order to secure their economic dominance, pursue military actions. In the alternative of degrowth, why would the US not respond in the same way?
Because the US is no longer driven to control, for example, supply chains.
You
in
fiat
the
that Trump is
ECS
no
that
longer
is
driven
driving
to
China
control
forward.
supply chains.
Sorry, what?
You fiat that Trump is no longer driven to control
Well,
supply
in
chains.
a world of a planned economy, the profit motive no longer exists. It is
So
not
Trump has
intrinsic
no
to
profit
government.
motive anymore. Elon Musk has no profit motive anymore.
Resources would be reallocated towards social
Who does
services. The government. Like,
So,
this is-
okay,
this
so-
is a to-
so you are fiating
By
that
the way,
Trump has
this is a
literally zero
totally
profit
non-starter. The 2AC said 2 words on this, did not say
Right,
mindset
because
shift
this
is a
was
voting
one and
issue,
two
just
parts
said.
had very little
You
highlight.
broke news,
but
the NDT,
okay.
like, let's be real. But, like,
That
the
doesn't mean you're
alternative
being
specifically
clear.
specified all of those things in the text. You just said, it must be single actor, single action. The action is a democratically planned economy. That includes X thing, like this is Socialism 101, it's the MBI's topic. If you cannot defend markets, you deserve to lose.
Okay, sure. The other impact that you have read is like this so you've read a few arguments about biotech bad.
Impact turn every
No,
innovation
yeah,
you said is
let me
good.
finish my question.
Sure.
You've also said that the alternative is better for innovation. How does the alternative's version of innovation
Because
avoid biotech
profit-based
and SMOs?
incentives reduce safety measures. So in the context of biotech, companies are rushing to push out CRISPR, gene editing, things like that, which means that there's no accountability within that because it's
No,
about
the
seeking
cards that you
short-term
have read
profitability.
say that there are intrinsic features of CRISPR that can be very dangerous. Why does the ult avoid that?
It's about the maximization of, quote, reduction in costs and increases in profitability, which creates the black swan events that it's referencing.
No, it's not the CRISPR part.
Okay, 100%.
The order is the state's counterplan, the politics DA, the disability K, the oil DA, the court's counterplan, and then the cafe.
Can you say it again?
States, politics, disability, oil, courts, cap. I can do it one more time.
Is it cap at the bottom?
Cap is last, yes.
Okay.
Okay. Okay.
Meat is good.
Need a second.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, I forgot about the dog.
What's before oil?
Oh,
Before oil is disability.
I just realized the 2 framework cards I read also were not sent. I would have sent them out.
Oh, right, yeah.
They were sent.
Okay, is everyone good? You're okay. Yeah. No. Okay, everyone's good.
States kick it, concede the burden theories, redirect the argument, not the team. Politics kick it, concede impact events, and Trump PC fails disability. Kick it, concede the burden, nothing can be crossed by the cap. Oil DA kick it. The plan does not increase global oil prices. It might contract supply in the United States a little bit, but that's not sufficient to actually raise prices. So the uniqueness evidence says that countries are increasing supply by hundreds of thousands of barrels in the status quo. Kick the uniqueness kind of plan there. Uniqueness evidence is far better than no terms of the decline of gold prices is still inevitable from tariffs, which everyone agrees will totally tank oil markets. Courts counterplan, defense corruption outweighs one magnitude. Contractors bankroll endless intervention, diplomatic fractures, and arms raising, success, invincibility, and propagation, and world review. That's suitable evidence. The internal benefit was dropped in the treaty, not a single word on it. No deviations in the White House. Sufficiency framing, weight deficits against risk of the internal, which is 100%. Judge Kick, doing it for the win, or perm with 3 arguments. Perm to the counterplan. It severs of litigation for clashing ground. 1. It does not adopt anything instead of legislation or agency regulation. The counterplan authorizes damages and expands standing to permit lawsuits that compel the plan. Adopt requires legislation better. 7. Adopt means by law to protect the environment. Court does not adopt means to announce the national plan. It compels. This is duty to enact legislation to protect the environment. The court itself votes at 11. 9. Court adopting the conduct of action takes by the legislative body. Right. It is not going to legislative body with authority to vote uniformly. Except 2. Is not clean energy policy. It requires presidential or congressional action. File 17. We find out that policy of Congress and national energy planning can be served for presidential initiative, congressional lawmaking policy made in both venues. It's quote not made by the courts. Code 7. Policy made legislators the body in statutory language not made by agency or courts. 5. Statutory interpretation resolves domain of legislative interest. LC 5. Legislative interest for policies use of the term resolve. This is an independent T argument since they said that they were a Department of the Interior. Independently mandates the result of a court order is never fiated. Pascal 18. Decisions are not self-fulfilling because of the limitation courts cannot implement their own decisions. Courts must not allow other institutions to carry out its directives. Violate competition to mandates not affect text. Anything else is a counterplan. No counterplan compatible because any action could result in the plan. For example, states could result in federal follow-up, but never mandates plan action. Prefer our definitions. 1. Precision. Don't just treat adopting policy as filler words that mean nothing. Each has precise legal meaning and excludes the courts. 2. Limits. They present both lit off the top by allowing tiny courts and agency acts that skirt core ground and more of an unpredictable precedents. 3. Agent counterplans good. They test implementation and education. Everyone agrees climate change is a problem. The question is how we solve it. No abuse. They have to defend the most powerful Congress in the world. On the top of our climate change literature is overwhelmingly left. Leaks in that benefit is wrong. We're not going for politics. The ruling firm. No text in the 2AC. We cannot evaluate textual or functional intrinsicness. A model debate that doesn't mandate text in the 2AC allows all functional and textual intrinsicness, which makes debate impossible for the net because they can append things to advantage counterplan firms. Strike it. No new 1AR text. The block decision is premised on 2AC mistakes, and the 1AR is too late. Do both answers apply. If it does the plan, it cannot overcome the political question doctrine. For all the answers below, if it's just per other issues, it doesn't solve. 1. Climate is key. It's a test case for political intrusion because climate solution is exclusively a legislative and executive prerogative. It's a bedrock political question. Tribe. 10. Climate nuisance is demonstrated by lack of connection between planners, interacting conduct by defendants, plans, offsetting, society, lacking in climate change conduct, constitution forbids. Contortion of stating bedrock principles are what? BGD protect. 2. Rightness. The lack of concrete specific application causes judicial dismissal. Hitchcock. 98. There's no controversy. Rightness governs power for the act. Rightness. Stands supposed to be before disputes mature to enable the court to decide if a plaintiff's not specifics. The court must apply on the case. I will read mu intrinsic standards if the 1AR reads a text for this permutation. Do both. I don't think was actually the 2AC, but I'm going to read it to answer the above perm. Do both fails. 1. Comment. The perm represents congressional or executive action, so the dispute is depoliticized and it's no longer court intrusion. That's our 1AC laying evidence. 2. Voidness. It's an advisory opinion prohibited by the doctrines of rightness, mootness, and finality. Far 86. Our advisory opinions are being based on not only partial lists and hypotheticals, but also requires dismissal of cases they are not alive or seems to be by virtue of a message that treating having no more than hypotheticals of finality, robust decision judgment will be subject to another bench. 3. Buck passing. Breaking the prior BGD requires acting alone. Tribe. 16. Despite turning away from BGD to court docs. Question refers to political branches of one corporate York Sound, little times and CSB case in neglecting the issue court churches role of political in the structure. The tribe biggest ambiguous from the keywords making commercial sentencing and virtually nothing else. Love courts with a glue by setting up an accountable opaque buck passing court should have begun the process to govern executive action apart from reading the tea lists of imagined process. The delay perm is intrinsic. It adds temporal separation between the counterplan and the plan. Even if each could be delayed, that's adding new sequencing fiated by neither. Rejected. Intrinsicness destroys all ground. They can specify normal means just by time sensitive or agent specific DAs and prevent education about real world trade-offs. Independently, the 2AC did not include a text. Scratch it. It's impossible to make separate segments or read DAs and still shift the verb in the 1AR. We don't need to win this, but it never should. Sawyer 17, the ordinary common meaning of the word should is expediency. Prefer our standards, delays by DAs and kills limits by allowing absence in the future. And perm vagueness is a voting issue. Further to clarify when the plan is fiated in the future makes it impossible to test. Independently, the perm does not solve. It requires fixed positions where the Fed pre-commits to a plan without generally abiding by the court. That'll leak. Void 20 reports laid by Intel Biden was going to lose out, continue to play the Biden. Now, solvency. The counterplan solves the case. The Supreme Court rules that the government is required to mitigate climate change via injunctions and enjoining emissions. That alone is sufficient, but compiling the plan ensures agencies and Congress follow along with an identical policy breaking the PDD that's more like a lane. It catalyzes a quote significant and effective normative shift and constraints political branches. June 21, just like the individual climate process, significant effective shifts, traditional events, and the government's private entities, emergency for meeting, and mission to make public knowledge about process. Some contagion, attribution, knowledge, judicial review, as accidental restriction, judicial femininity, and discover restraints on time will recognize the right to stable climate, along with due process of MPTD, data and gain information by serving as a check on political branches, and specifically can solve their carbon tax card. Damages are functional carbon tax. Last off, using damages for executive policy, theory, underlying nuisance, rebels, Magovian tax innovation, they internalize actionalize and market by making activity costly for participating in nuisance space, with opportunity to question here. On the best info possible, winning damage in the context of enterprise practice, or for analogies, damages resemble attacks levied by courts. Anish just smart, so we put internal benefits answers in the doc he sent out, but Neo did not read them. I'm not answering it. So the 1AR does not get new answers in the internal benefit, which is 100% risk. The K. Condo is good, we get what we did. 1, block 2, after changing the 2AC, which requires multiple options, they encourage sandbagging, which undermines clashing turns Q. 2, negative flex, the negative zones, reaction rates, after choice, independent private testing, intrinsic of unpredictable advantages, add-ons and deficits. 3, arbitrariness, no difference between separating models, so no rest basis for theory, and unpredictable rule is worse than none, which always just ends with predictability, independently new, undisclosed affirmed are bad, they score pure on prep, and make critical testing impossible. That's a vote for fairness in class, disclosing 30 minutes before. Solves 4, logic, finds the best policy option, disproving advocacy, does not make the plan good. 5, innovation, risk aversion, mandates fallbacks for safety, testing, and experimentation. Q and research are inevitable, fund by DAs, and procedurals dispose ad hoc condo makes after too powerful, incentivizes process and placement, and causes a research imbalance. Did you know that declaration kind of plan? Kick it, concede the perm. None of these deficits apply because the count plan is not uncertain. They didn't have a reason for that on either count plan with 2C, and the count plan isn't delayed. None of the permutation standards apply to this count plan either.
In 13.
Oh, are you? Okay. Yeah. Just. Yeah, that's fine.
Orders, advantage 2, advantage 1, courts, and then captain.
Two, one, course cap?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Good. Panels.
Economic crisis causes global war. The low evidence is causes terrorism, global conflagration as populists come into the government, which causes extinction of all evidence is about economic decline, not financial crisis, which means the buffers to stop economic decline from escalating are gone. The other evidence that answered about the global evidence is about sustainability, which beyond decay. Now the SUSE evidence about downturn, not financial crisis, which means they have no evidence about economic financial crisis causing extinction, which is unique inequality and not our impacts does not matter. Now it turns decay. Advantage 1. The absolute reason why biodiversity is so sustainable by putting a tax on polluters, which means the force of patching up oil leaks. Now capitalism solves war again 19, we live the most peaceful period. The war mortality increases from 1815 onward. The cause growth will increase inequality, transparency, diversity, the entire system. Economic industries like the border and subsidiary benefit critical economic conversations back to conflict wars will continue. Predictions policies signal the economy by competition, airless war was economism, the spirit of fascism. The liberal social system is relations to same powers, leadership, message, empire span. The difficulty is link for people's wars become less wording Holland and Belgium only picture of restoration is concerned about US Japanese Taiwan and if you develop the countries, the courts kind of plan. Prediction to the Kaplan that the plan solves the whole case. It's functionally the same as the Kaplan. No one knows about fiat. So doing it no matter what solves does not make a difference. Delay Kaplan is 0 off ground. 1. No author assumes it's a policy. 2. Delay plus politics is unbeatable. Makes app research impossible. Technical competition is bad. It justifies word mix, anagrams, appendix, etc. Which is bad for negative ground. They say intrinsic. No, it's question of our should definition. Extend the 2C definition. The should is not immediate. And their definition says expediency, which just means when convenient, not instant. So answer our interpretation. They say shorts all net ground. We don't need the text, which is fucking nonsensical. But some need to text for permission to both. But our definition proves it's just textual competition. But we've extended that's bad. They say net ground 1. Delay capitals are bad. Not court office. No net ground. It's by instant policy because every author is writing assuming the verbal. 2. Still get test sets like econ pricing and energy. This has 3. You do not get politics because of the plan pass instantly. The president would not have time to spend PC, which answers it. They say no text answered above. The should definition also answered above, not term vagueness because we specified sequencing, not time frame. So it's not vague. There's also no reason why that's a voting issue because you still get your generics. You can go for competition. The deficits leaks. Nothing to leak because actors don't know about. Yeah, there's also no impact to this deficit in the first place. The captain. 2C1 is framework. 1 link are supposed to be about the plan and the plan and its consequences. This means the mark is back in the subscript gets backed out by our offense. 2. The app should clinic work with justifications better than without them. The actors app the vectors are fair games. 3. Fairness outweighs enter excludes standalone to critiques of individual parts or dirty words. Otherwise, they makes app ground impossible. Fairness outweighs system basis the game and the creed. The technical debating. 4. No other impacts. Losing side is proves arguments about subject information and winning our justifications are good proves that we should form our subjects around them for better role. The Fisher evidence 1. We don't agree with our knowledge question is possible because we feel it might not be possible, but we don't believe in what we say. 2. It's linked by clash and allows for better knowledge production. We still have this along reciprocal lines. 3. Stands by Perfcon proves they invest in bad knowledge production. Even if Perfcon is theoretically good, is educationally bankrupt because they are complicit in the same bad knowledge systems. So they say market logics 1. We don't include their market logics. They can have cases that are about the plan's consequences. 2. DDoP and econ sets all this off and it's not fairness. They see that the plan after it's cannot solve and they get infinite cases for representations. We cannot weigh our consequences and it's unpredictable. They say they turn it wrong. It's interlinked, which is answered above. They say playbook is bad because it's fast capitalist work. Those are backed up by theory, interpretations, which means there's only linked to their interpretation. Clash, they say we get markets, that's not a reason. The fairness extension was answered above. Clash is not inevitable. It's a question of good clash, which their interpretation precludes. Now, the interpretation.
Sorry, can you quickly go to check Slack, please?
Yeah.
Just go back to the court's counterplan.
Course counterplan, hidden T was stupid. DOI is a possible implementation. It's not mandated, and we get plain text in a vacuum. Now, back to the permutation. Permutation do both. It solves because the reason why markets are bad, but none of that is intrinsic to the plan, so you can treat this as a double bind that they have dropped. They say often see this as bad because permutations are just a test competition. The fact that socialism and the plan are exclusive is not reason why the permutation cannot solve other parts of socialism. They say MBI's definition is into the 2C definition of MBI's, and which means it's not command and control. CEP is legally binding. We get a repeal with alternative predictions can still solve the other parts of socialism. Now, innovation peaking. They concede that capitalism innovation is peaking, and that only the alternative can solve it. They've conceded a double turn, and this means that biotechnology and SRMs cause extinction, which only the alternative causes substantively crosses. There's no reason why their innovation is somehow safer than ours, which means sustainability and triad can only go one way. Sustainability, one, the plant-based capitalism is sustainable, making so and cost competitive is the first step to absolute decoupling tech as a tech development. This proves capitalism. Two, all three rails at a smaller scale, economy cannot produce the mass investment required for innovations fast enough to save up the worst warming that's the latter's evidence. Studies prove it whereas compost 20 stages income, change that culture, adapts equal to special resources, produce less around resources, sweat distribution, impacts longevity, Iraq's living growth and not deteriorate the environment. They say no planned economy, this is just an alternative, but the links will prove it's wrong. The links are stupid. They say delaying repair, the app stops delaying repair, which means it's actually a link turn. They say it makes the growth worse. Good evidence is about liability schemes, but we agree that liability schemes are bad and unpredictable, which is why the app is necessary. The toxicity link was stupid bullshit and not even a warrant. Now, the alternative, it fails. New arguments are justified, but they now make deficits with the app. They read no impacts and alternative explanations. Only market stable price discovery. Regulators don't know the distribution of future damages, so the miss repairs with the shooting upside that would otherwise do enormous damage. Lemon 21. Market purpose changes when listen to what distribution which is going to be with crucial. And then remember, I gotta think about the regulators was going to figure out these damages, benefit, and ideas, how we lead in this involving well, but every way I'll work about regulators. Nationalization cannot solve cleanup. The best way they could do is bailouts, but bailouts void operators' responsibility, which means riskier, more damaging investments, which means all turns sustainability, and it's worse for all other impacts. This ice and evidence. Building that out and repairing is impossible. Its worst case cost is 100 trillion expenditure. Makes it impossible to track liability because operators sell wells frequently. Regulatory solutions also shell game to death, which is the one to see leading evidence is extended for reference. Absent a trailing ARO certificate, regulators, this is impossible to know where and how to decommission, which means command and control is impossible. Sure, 24 liabilities are not allowed to assume this market separation with the solution of and get you. Do not discount about the actual liability should not even allow you to also cost of access to these companies to enjoy and open disclosures if no one else can be access to you see this non-vision long producing wells. The majority of ideal wells are unknown BILI 23 even knowing to be a challenge finance one has 17,000 civil local efforts for media or no notice for quite wells will be 200,000 and 800,000.
737.
That's correct. 800,000.
Wait, that's BILI.
Yeah.
Yeah, Billy.
Right, 737. Yeah, yeah.
Sorry. It's a really dumb table.
Thank you. I apologize.
Yeah.
Yeah, it doesn't matter. Yeah, it doesn't matter.
agreed to kick the misdisclosed advantage.
The order is the court scanner plan.
Do you want to?
And
Yeah.
then the cap kit. For the cap kit.
The one airdrop knew us bad. It was clear, warranted, non-arguable. And the one in our no new answers. The one in our said independently, quote, new undisclosed parameters are bad. They script pre-round prep and make critical testing impossible. That is a voting for flash, declaring fairness and clash, disclosing 30 minutes before solves. I'll be explicitly slowed down on answering conditionality to get this argument. This is the definition of a full argument. It had interpretation, violation, and impact. They get to read new apps. They just have to disclose them, but they specifically did not do before the round. Nothing can be cross-applied. No reasonability from the choice thesis. Reasonability without competing interpretations, so they have not defended one. In the one in our no functional limits, terminal defense, so they have no reason they should be allowed to read new apps. It was just after point 3 and before point 4 conditionality in the one in R, and we explicitly flagged it, so this is obviously off. It's everyone heard it. You cannot justify, not having a warrant. This was not a 5-second thing. It was 15 seconds, clearly warranted, no new answers. At the top, they've also dropped topicality. They dropped all of our definitions, including our definition of resolved. Apps must be legislative or presidential per adopt energy policy and resolved. The violation is clear. There are 2 of them. 1, they said that they were the Department of Interior. This is explicitly cut and dry. The after clarifications of what the plan does in the 2AC are grounded into a CT violation, especially when you and Avi spent time and process going back and forth about what the mandate of the plan was. They came to the conclusion that it was a charge administered by the DOI, which is grounds for a T violation. 2nd, plan text does violate, does not include any of the words but resolved, energy policy, or adopt, which means that even if you go with their standard of plan text in a vacuum, you still vote neg, since the plan text does not include any of those words and does not mandate legislative or presidential action. Regardless, reject plan text in a vacuum. 1, it destroys limits, letting them fiat anything with our social language is totally unfair. They'll reclarify later, which destroys ground and clash. 3, we agree topicality is about the plan, but that is characterized by tags and cross-text. They said that it was the DOI and cross-text, which is something we both agreed on, given the thing about cross-text earlier. It's predictable and fair. They chose what to defend and give the neg inroad system to some vagueness. They've also dropped our standards. It's better for limits of ground because there are an infinite number of unpredictable actors that
precedent advantage that they could theoretically read. There is no way you can reject this argument since the only thing the one air said, plain in a vacuum, was a model of debate that the app expressly violates. In some way, the treatises don't say plain in a vacuum against interpretations of words that are not in the plain text. You would not think of the app met our interpretation of adopt, energy policy, or resolved, which again are not in the plain text. So plain text in a vacuum is 0, obviously neg. They have no interpretation forwarded, and plain text in a vacuum is 0 because they don't have the words in the plan, the substance proper. Permutation to the plane, and then permutation to the counterplane in the plane is intrinsic. It adds time frame not present in the plane nor the counterplane, which is totally ad hoc and unpredictable, which justifies all intrinsicness. You should not arbitrarily draw a line for delay in this instance or delay bad, because the implication of their offense is that they can fiat new sequencing and time frame despite all detesting counterplanes. So one air is also totally new, and you should reject any new two-air extrapolation. It was would be in the choice C and does not justify this level of explanation. It is definitively intrinsic. The swear evidence in one says that expediency is a mandate of should. That applies immediacy. Any alternative reading magnifies our offense. The choice C interpretation is far worse because it links to all of our offense. Now, there's no aft-ground impact. 1. Theory checks. The delay counterplane can be explicitly excluded on theoretical grounds. It's not offense against our model of competition because the delay counterplane that they are critiquing is due to plane in 6 months, which is not our interpretation. Second, advantage construction. They can read time-sensitive advantages that are deficits to delay that outweigh the net benefit that circumvents aft research offense, which is the first standard, because it is possible to be and you can create deficits against it. It's proven, empirically proven, because the delay counterplane has been beaten before on substance. Now, textual competition is good. Anything else allows the dismissal of words in the plane, which means that there's no necessary value to it. Obviously, people in Congress do compare the actual wording in the resolution and the plans when they're presented with both the plan and the counterplan. So, including that, it would be far more arbitrary, which leads to all of their offense. Delay in this instance is good because it's not literally due to the plan in 6 months like the example I gave, but rather a distinct, relevant opportunity cost that the permutation would obviously forego, which necessarily checks their arguments about testing and research. The version of delay is backed up by theory answered above. Textual competition was also done there, but their interpretation also justifies infinite science fiction due to plan in the future, destroys timely education, and spikes all of the ground. Worst case examples should not be applied because theory crowds out most of them. The last thing that they said was perm vagueness. Yes, it does apply. Infinite sequencing and theoretical, it could theoretically occur even if it doesn't seem possible in this specific instance. Their interpretation of intrinsicness does allow that, and they have not actually specified what sequencing would be a mandate within either the plane or the counterplane, because we've said the counterplane is instant, so there is no sequencing or intrinsicness that could be or time frame that could be added without it being intrinsic. Yes, impact to leaks. Our evidence says it has occurred. Biden is explicitly a leak-lived administration, but this also applies more to Trump given the recent events about the Houthis. So it definitely states that there is a substantive DA to the permutation. The last argument was just you do not get politics about PC. I'm sort of confused about the implication of this argument. Our whole point is that politics is a necessary, timely trade-off. With their interpretation, politics should be granted ground. Their examples about econ and pricing are obviously thumped. They read Trump thumps trade and deregulation, etc., which proves that it's totally unworkable. Especially, you should hold the bar for new affirmatives, which is a reason why you should defer neg. Is there anything else? The only other argument that they have was about the expediency thing, but expediency should be read to mean instant. Otherwise, the implication is that it would link to all of our offense. They didn't have an explicit rejection of textual competition. They just asserted it was bad. The twin C, the one in R, and earlier had a direct justification for it. The last thing was just hidden T is stupid. Obviously, answered above, plenty for vacuum is 0. But this is all nonsense given the UF's bad. Like we've been here before. Like you should not arbitrarily decide that you don't want to go for it. It's NDT. It's flagged in 1 hour. You can put arguments. Anything else?
Okay, 244. order is the counterplan, then wherever you float the T argument, which was, yeah, it was probably the counterplan, but yeah, I'm doing that after the actual substance of the counterplan. And then the cat K, which is where you have to backlash.
Okay.
Oh, sorry. My sheet is bugging out. Okay. Oh, what? Okay.
Current to the counterplan of the plan. Should does not mean immediate. The literal semantics of our definition don't matter as much because we're miles ahead on debatability. A is after ground. Their interpretation justifies doing delayed counterplans at the highest level. Imagine a 200 that was due the plan, but just a month after the politics bill passes, with politics as a net benefit. Negative teams will run to the margins because this is a competitive activity. Preserving role for the app is key. Both sides come to debate with an expectation of a fair chance of winning, and their interpretation could literally lead to a 90% win rate. They say delayed counterplans can be excluded on theoretical grounds. This is obviously not true when they have justified definitions that say delay is the most predictable interpretation under their world, because should must mean immediate. Advantage constructions and deficits are not real. Deficits to delay do not necessarily outweigh politics, but mean that every single app version of app construction requires some sort of delay and certainty. Which requires some sort of time, which requires some sort of immediacy keyword. But obviously, no authors in literature are. Most of our carbon tax authors are not written directly in April 4/4. Obviously, most of them are from 2023 and 2025, which means most of the affirmatives on this topic. It means that there's no actual reason why delay counterplans. No actual reason why delay counterplans would be obviated. We only need to win that delay counterplans have a small risk in order to delay counterplans have a small net benefit in order to beat the affirmative, because it solves virtually 100% of the affirmative, which means the threshold for having a net benefit and solvency is extremely low in the first place. But they drop topic education or interpretation deletes process counterplans as essential. Anything else allows for block recycling. Come on, HIA has been read for literal decades, and unilateral whatever has been read for decades. Debaters come into the year with the expectation to dive deep into a whole new literature base. This year's climate under their model, debaters leave the room with no knowledge about whether or not with only knowledge about whether or not should is immediate, not instead of practical education about the best method to solve climate change. The one here is not new and Blippi, the one in our new read 5 new lines on this, and we read definitions of why it should not be immediate, and it's not intrinsic. Obviously not intrinsic because the counterplan includes a delay component. It sequences by making the courts do it and then compelling the affirmative afterwards. The and then component is important because it includes the delay component. The permutation just uses that delay component, but for doing the plan afterwards instead, not going for but they have dropped crucial offense in that ground. Connor spent a little bit of time on this, but didn't really answer it properly, or they couldn't figure out politics up here, and I'm saying politics is key to net ground, which trades off with our interpretation. Our argument was that they destroy politics because you cannot get the politics is that if the plan is passed instantly, imagine a floor time that it would obviously make no sense, because if the plan is passed instantly, there would be literally no floor time. If they think politics is so crucial to net ground, for example, and that benefit to states, then they obviously do not get it under their interpretation, which means we have more offense than them because they have not answered anything about net ground. Even if delay counterplans are bad, we have residual offense, but they also drop defense. You still get dissets like econ and pricing dissets, because even if uniqueness is worse in the future, it applies to both sides. It's better because we focus on links of actual mechanics and markets, which is especially good for the negative right now when uniqueness is already so bad. Textual competition is bad. We said real words about this in the 1AR, and obviously real words about this in the 1AR, but justified new arguments because they exploded the block. On both on all of the permutations. Textual competition is bad. A, it doesn't test negation. E.g., you don't do the plan. It's not competitive, even though it obviously functional. ESP is arbitrary. No one knows what the text is. It can be letters, syllables, morphemes, words, sentences, etc. But C is functional combination solves because it's all about how debates work, and you look at the text and determine the function in the first place. Drop that perm do both was accepted by their own interpretation, which means it's obviously an arbitrary. They have an arbitrary interpretation of what textual combination is required. It's a debate norm and predictable. There's no actual offense because everybody knows what perm do the counterplan and perm do the counterplan then the plan actually mean. They say actually mean. Okay. T. Sorry. Plan text in a vacuum, the impact is objectivity. You should scratch out the whole 2-1R. They did not say any of this stuff in the 1R. And obviously, you can say whatever we want because the whole 2-1R was new on topicality. The 1R pointed out this is T without actual reasons for our we mean or a violation. The impact of the plan text in a vacuum is objectivity. There's no violation. A possible interpretation of the plan is using Congress. That is the definition of plan text in a vacuum. The words themselves do not have to be in the plan text. Objectivity outweighs. Anything else makes it impossible to be affirmative because of infinite shiftiness under their interpretation. A single word or sentence that the app says in cross-text or speech becomes ground for the pig,
which is completely arbitrary. Only plain text in a vacuum ties down topicality to a plain text which is necessary to make debate predictable. This outweighs and reasonable. This means that we are reasonably topical and outweighs any of their stuff, because come on, the one and R did not actually establish any standards for their violation. They just simply said we did not meet, but did not give you a reason to prefer why violating this interpretation is specifically bad. There's no model of debate that they have defended, or you can explain to me after the RFD, which means that insofar as we have a risk of meeting them, it is more unpredictable to say that we don't. Limits are stupid. You still get dissents to the topic. Resolutional language is a reason we help you more. Cross this can't solve insofar as it does hurt you more, because it gives you concessionary ground. So the plain text is better for limits than you can also just go for combination. You can't define words in the resolution and go for a counterplan with a net benefit. Also, sorry, forgot on permutation, do the counterplan, then the plan. No solvency of evidence because people do not perceive fiat, even if there were some potential for leaks. This obviously does not happen because people do not understand that you do the plan anyways. They just perceive it as doing the counterplan, then the plan. The new app stuff on Cap case. There's definitely cross-applicable offense. One, the whole plan framework on the Cap case, it tells you that you should evaluate in this debate. It tells you the judge should only evaluate the plan and its consequences. Nothing else matters. Framework is way of analysis that this judge uses for instruction. If we win framework, you should not even evaluate the new apps bad, because it's not an argument that should be evaluated under our interpretation. Second, cross-apply app ground. New apps are necessary to protect innovation. That is key to class. The money our framework made arguments about why we need an abstract ground, and only that is necessary to build clash, which is good to test knowledge. This is cross-applicable because the one in our new app get coaches out of the room. They are good for app innovation, which is better for class functional limits apply. You get the whole topic. 3. Also, this is cowardice. It was 5 words and the 1 AR and spread at full speed. It was also in the 1 R and without a clear claim in Warman, which is literally sub point 4 on conditionality. Then you cannot vote on this. The 1 R literally said the words new apps bad without any actual argument. Look, I understand you probably have words no apps bad at like sub point 6 on condo on your flow, but if there was no fully fleshed argument, you should vote neg. You should not vote neg on this in the NDT. It's cowardice.
Well, you don't mind trying to prop the door open now that it's over. So
It went off 3 degrees during the day. Dude, I was sweating.
I mean, it's supposed to be on, but it's just not.
It doesn't even sound
Maybe we broke down.
I don't think
What?
so.
But I do think it was on when I walked in. Oh, no,
It
it
wasn't.
wasn't, because you said there's no vent yet. All right. What else is it?
It's like cool in this room, but very hot in this.
Yeah.
This is fried.
Wait, there's an element outside.
Yeah, there's 2. There's one right there.
Do you know what happened in the GH trend? Have you been following?
I'm not, no.
Okay. I was just curious though, if the 2NR included misdisclosure or not.
I think we dropped something similar.
Oh, okay.
I don't really know.
you know where they are.
Oh, I thought they were doing it.
Unfortunately, missing a team makes it hard.
I should have told them that I was just going to look for you.
I put the note that some of them
But I
brought
think they
this
were
up.
gone before you left.
Oh.
Yeah.
It's out. It's out. Yeah.
Sorry. No, you get. Don't get announced.
If you like.
I don't think
No, no.
Okay. Good debate, everyone. Congratulations for being at the NDT and all that. This decision was a 3-0 for the negative for Michigan. Yeah, I'll go first. I'll try to be pretty quick. So I voted neg on new AFSPAD. I think it's obviously conceded in the 1AR. I think it's also kind of the one instance where I would allow new theory arguments in the block that are kind of about the 1AC insofar that I think it is actually a pretty responsive answer to Kondo. And just like, I have a complete argument in the 1R. Like there is a warrant on it at Stratsky, which also seems pretty fine to me. Like there's no reason for me to be like, oh, this is like inherently not justified as opposed to other types of theory arguments. I also think that obviously like the 2AR does this spin on the framework interp. I don't think it solves. I took a look at the two interps, both in how it's explained in the 2AC and then in the 1AR. I think it says in the 2AC that links must be about the plan. I think if anything that sort of supercharges their offense because the only way that they would have access to those links is if there was disclosure of the 1AC, so their interp would probably solve this type of offense better. And so I think that's probably like sufficient. The T debate stuff, it's really weird because I'm not 100% sure which exact T definitions the block wanted just as perm answers and which ones they wanted also as T arguments. The only one that I have clearly flagged is the resolved as legislative definition, and I'm not sure if the other ones were supposed to be or not, but I did have that one flagged. This makes everything a little bit weird for a couple of reasons, because one, obviously plain text in a vacuum wouldn't apply because it's not in the plain text, but two, you would never have it in a plain text because the word resolved is like generally not part of the resolution. It's like the introduction to the existence of the resolution and not the resolution itself. And so it kind of makes things a little bit weird for like, how do I interpret like yes, if it's just like yes, no in the resolution or in the plain text, like it's not. But that being said, if I'm interpreting plain text in the vacuum to be more in the sense of like, if the word is in the resolution or in the plain text, then I interpret it in the way that the definition is designed to be interpreted. And there's other definitions in the block that make it a little bit weird because there's other definitions that say if it's adopt, it must be a policy, which means that I would just sort of ignore the 2AC spin on DOI stuff and there would also be Congress involved. And so then it would maybe not apply as much because like, you know, it would be additionally legislated, even though the resolve stuff is not plain text in a vacuum. So it's kind of confusing about which definitions I'm supposed to be doing plain text in the vacuum for, and how that's happening here. The other thing is I do also agree that there's no I don't have a standards anywhere. That being said, I don't know if it 100% matters. There's not saying that, I don't think it's sufficient to say that T is not an impact, because I think plain text in a vacuum is much more equated to a we meet argument than it is a counter-interp. Considers really only matter when I'm trying to interpret like two different worlds, and I just don't think that plain text in a vacuum is explained in that kind of sense. I would put it more in this debate, I expanded like a we meet argument, so if it's just like yes, no is topical, they probably don't meet the resolved in a plain text in a vacuum, but maybe with plain text in a vacuum you meet the other definitions that may or may not be T arguments, but I was able to resolve it above it, so I didn't think it mattered. The perm debate, my gut instinct was AF, but I resolved the debate about this, so I didn't spend a whole lot of time thinking about it. That's all.
I can go next. So I also ended up voting on the Knox bad argument. I thought it was just the easiest way to vote. So honestly, I didn't spend a lot of time interpreting the T debate. I don't have a lot to say there. So I'll just kind of like default to Simon's perspective. But I'm going to give some feedback for the negative first. While I voted on this argument, I think it's flagged, I think it's fully explained, I have it in the 1 in R, all of that is true. I think that the 2 in R could have extended more of the warrants on the substantive level for why new apps actually are bad for education and fairness. I think what ends up happening is that it seems to me that you're doing a shallow explanation to not allow for new responses in the 2AR, like you don't want to have new warrants so then they can add in new things. So I get that strategic move, but I still think that you should connect it a little bit better to the strat skew arguments and maybe some of the stuff that you had in the 1 in R about afterwards being too powerful, the imbalance, and why negative ground outweighs. I don't think any of those would have justified new answers to the actual interpretation, and it would have at least like made it a little bit better. Like I thought for a second about it. The second thing that I considered is whether or not I allow for the framework on the CapK answers that, and so I just don't know how I could vote on this argument. Here's how I think about it. I interpreted it a little bit differently. Most of the time, I just kind of view this through like a form versus content distinction. The framework interpretation is a content distinction about what you should allow once you're like considering the debate. It's about epistemology versus the consequences of the plan, but not whether or not the plan should be like evaluated at that like prior level. And that's why I think it's like a different type of procedural distinction, even though like framework as procedural might be something that like verbiage could be cross-applied. And so because of that distinction, I just don't think that it's super responsive. And I also think if I were to view it as responsive, that would just be a model of debate that I don't think I'd be willing to vote for, because it would mean that like if you could cross-apply, just like only evaluate the plan versus the consequences of the plan to take out a theory argument, I just think that would be a bad model of debate that doesn't allow for procedural violations like disclosure or the other things that we talked about. So that's mostly that. Also, I don't allow for the new 2AR answers. I think they're too new. I think that it's clearly dropped. But even if I do, I think that it wouldn't have been sufficient to beat the argument. There should have been a little bit more response in the 2AR to the 30-minute disclosure standard is good enough to like solve for innovation things, which should have just had a better explanation if you were going to like allow them to be considered. I also don't have a terminal impact to like getting coaches out of the room, so all these things just needed to have a little bit more terminal impact if I were going to consider them. I just don't end up getting there.
I don't disagree with most of both of the other judges' decisions. I think I considered making this like similarly the only subject of my RFD, or like the primary reason that I actually did decide. I didn't. Primarily because I disagree, I guess, with the part of Simon that thinks that it is inappropriately reciprocal, or like that it's responsive to Kondo in a way that could not have been introduced in the 1NC. I think that there's an argument that the 1NR is not a constructive, that is just persuasive to me, maybe as an old person. And that was like it is totally conceivable that if I was, for whatever reason, like emotionally invested in voting this way because of none of this actually is a description of this debate, I don't want to be super clear, but like, let's say I had motivated reasoning, right? And I just like, you know, for whatever reason, really wanted to vote on this. Like, I absolutely could. But I think in this context, given that I have the ability to vote on a different argument, as, you know, debated, etc., for me, I can happily be like, this became a lot less relevant, but I don't disagree with anything that Smith said. I do think I flowed the entire argument. I think 15 seconds is a little generous in the description of how long it took. But it was complete. It had a warrant, had an impact. Anyway, it had a counter-interp that solved that offensively with the argument that it solved that offense, etc. Now, on the counterplan, though, I do think that the 2AR reclarification of what plain text in a vacuum means is smart and somewhat persuasive, but that's not what I interpreted the argument to mean when made in the 1AR. I think Simon talked about this a little bit. I just want to unpack some things. So I'm skeptical that that's even what the 1AR genuinely meant. When making it as the only response to an arg that was like clear that everybody understood to be a topicality arg, if you called it like, oh, the T arg, hidden T arg. So I think the 2NR is correct, that like under plain text vacuum as I understood it until the 2AR you do not meet because plain text does not include any of those words. At addendum with an asterisk about the word result. While I agree with the part of the 2AR's explanation to mean that the plan does not solely need to use resolutional language to meet a plain text vacuum interp, I do think any understanding of plain text vacuum requires someone to have defined a word in the plan to mean the same thing that the neg has defined a word in the topic to mean. Hopefully that's like clear enough as a way to like reconcile this in a way that I think it like actually reflects community practice. Unlike new apps bad, while this argument was introduced in the 1NR, which is now constructed, it was introduced as a response, like yes on another flow, which is arguably a complicating factor, but a minor one given that the arg on the other flow about the plan being DOI was referenced on this flow. It's like a response to a 2AC argument that was the very first time the AF introduced the idea of that argument, right? Unlike the 1AC, which did introduce the idea of the 1AC that was new, right? Anyway, so it seems justified as a, like not a violation of the like rule/norm of no new argumentative claims in anything other than structures. Much less sympathetic to the 2AR's complaints about the 1NR sandbagging this as a TR, as I understood it in the initial instance as a complete TR, several pieces of definition out of a clearly articulated interpretation violation, flagged argument that it was a T, clearly articulated standards, which were like imprecision, the educational value of treating adopted policies, filler words, ground implications of tiny court and agency AFs, and then when copy pasting this section of the debate down later to like just make the flow easier to line up across speeches, like I moved 11 separate cells of arguments that I understood in the original instance to be the topicality arg. Anyway, while the infinite shifting is like just to cover some like new 2AR args, because there is a lot of like appeal that is not wholly unpersuasive by the 2AR that is like, look, this is an instance in which you should intervene. So like while the infinite shiftiness because the single word becomes grounds for pick arg is new, I think the 1NR standards are not unresponsive even if they never had the chance to like contextualize them, like neg ground versus infinite unpredictable actors is ameliorated by picks out of plan words when they happen to apply. And the 2NR has said that this model is predictable and fair and gives them inroads, the AF inroads, because they can just defend the plan, meaning that the AF in writing their plan gets to pick their poison, implying that they could have picked the resolutional language that the neg defined and then gone for plain text vacuum against such a topicality argument, and then I happily would have voted that. In case it helps in future debates, I personally do find that reasoning persuasive, like picks out of plain text words are pretty great. The fact that the AF gets to choose their plain text and then define it for plain, like I love plain text vacuum, I might be the only person, like maybe me and Kevin are. Anyway, that means that, yeah, right, none of that is like relevant to my decision, I just wanted to say in case it was useful.
Right.
Other new 2AR args, cross-ex bad standard would make more sense if you would answer the cross-ex question / when making the we are the DOI arg, you should word it more like least necessary means is, but we don't think agent, or like is that we are the DOI, but we don't think that agent counterplans are competitive. It's a little harder to argue with the wording like the plan is the DOI. The neg block also discussed cross-ex responses as evidence of like what they were then basing their block strategy off in a couple places that made, or that meant that arg, like you would have a clear opportunity to make that argument about cross-ex in the 1AR. Alright, right, I'm spending too long on this, which was a note I made to myself ahead of time. The other perm. I think the AF wins perm do the plan then the counter plan. I didn't spend as much time thinking about this. Basically because like before the round ended, I had decided that one, expediency does not imply immediacy. In fact, it seems to imply fastest, least necessary means, which despite the fact that that's a mouthful, is to me like the default understanding of fiat that all of the community generally adopts in practice. And I think that would have actually been better matched to your standards. And the reason that I wanted to bring this up is because I think this is like a super easy fix, because it also would have solved their argument about fiat takes out the link on politics. And then second, I thought the 2AR was right about the fiat takes out the link on politics during part of your offense. Delay kind of plans are bad though. Right, those are all of my thoughts. Sorry for it.
How amenable are you all to a 2AR that tries to pick this up by saying this is all really silly?
I kind of feel like you did that. To me, I initially thought it was a mistake not to keep perfcon condo alive. Now,
in the 1AR.
Yeah, in the 1AR.
Yeah.
Given that to me, the like this was egregious. Like there are actively contradictory factual descriptions of the world, which to me is different than like reading a dissent that happens to link to your CapK. Like contradictory factual claims. I don't know how anyone can debate that except by conceding one and cross-applying it to the other. And yeah, and maybe I'm just like really old school on this, but I also hate condos. So anyway, so to me, like that would have been the easiest way out of all of this, particularly against a big one in C, because it's just like, it's an escape valve. That being said though, I did not hate the package of arguments you ended up with as kind of weird, meaning the perms on the counterplan, the way that the debate went. And I didn't hate some of the way you debated the CapK or anything. So I don't, I think, have very much helpful advice other than to be like, condo exists for this type of a situation in my mind.
Yeah, my only like substantive round comment was this is why 1AR should always have condo, because that would give you offense against these later.
I guess, presumably, if we extended condo, we wouldn't have dropped new AFSPAD. In a world where we do drop new AFSPAD, do you think there is like, what do you think is the optimal path of recourse for the 2AR?
Unfortunately, when these things are so late breaking, it's really hard, because I think the true strat is to gaslight them into not going for it. But I think it's really hard to do when you're this late breaking, where the only speech where you could have gaslit them is the one where you dropped it. And there's not enough time afterwards to deal with the problem. So like, I think it's just sort of, at this point, I think dropping it that late in the debate is kind of the issue.
Okay.
So I mean, I think I guess my point is it's not winnable.
Okay.
Sorry.
Yeah, like I think the whole like, fuck off, like, this is really dumb and I don't deserve to lose is not the wrong persuasive strategy. It's just always a gamble. Like, you're just banking on judge intervention.
Right, I mean, yeah, one that, but two, I think it's the right thing if you can say that in the 2AC. Like, if the 2AC drops it, you know, it's bad, then you're just like, you can't go for this. Like, this is so fucked. And then that gives them another speech to make that decision and like puts down our mind, because like we're gonna flow what you say regardless of that, and they're not gonna know how we're flowing it. And so, like because it's so late, there was only one iteration for that to happen, and that's the iteration in which it gets dropped. And so, like that's why there's sort of like a fundamental issue there.
Sure. Evelyn, you're saying?
No, I think I agree. Like I've been looking at different like 1AR arguments that you could maybe use to like make into a bigger deal and be like, this is on the same level, and I just don't think that there's anything there. You make these like framework like you talk about perfcon in the framework argument on the CapK, so like maybe that's like an inroad if you're gonna cross apply framework that you can try to like bring back up perfcon, but I just don't necessarily, because it's conceded in the block. Or in the 2NR, but I kind of agree. I just think it's really difficult because it's just, yeah, it's just a voting issue that was conceded.
Yeah, go ahead.
Maybe what you said is close to what I'm about to say, and if so, I apologize. I guess I said it wrong. But a way of explaining framework that's like the topic and plan focus like makes the entire debate predictable. Like they're always prepared. And that was our argument when saying framework, because when preparing for the topic, as long as we are topical, like, they're ready, and it solves critical thinking, and all that can happen in advance without knowledge of the plan. Then again, like, I know you did say some things about framework. I didn't interpret them that way, but like, maybe that was what you were saying.
Yeah, and I guess you have
Yeah.
you have like half ground arguments in there too. Like this just like outweighs.
Yeah.
It's like implicit answers to this. That's why we didn't answer it, because it's answered in framework. Like I don't know, maybe those types of posturing things.
Yeah, it's a perfect example of the gaslighting.
Yeah, exactly.
Like,
Like, this is how I'm trying to tell you how to gaslight. Yeah.
And to bring for what it's worth, like when I was looking at that the CapK, like the 2AC def, it's not like plan focused broadly. I think it is links must be to the plan, which I think is like slightly like it's not plan focused, but it's not plan focused in the sense that it is truly responsive to new XPath.
McCaffrey, for T, your the like reason we did not meet was because the plan did not include any of the words, and we did not define any of the words in the plan.
to mean the same.
To mean the
Yeah.
same. Yeah. Okay. Cool.
But like, otherwise.
Yeah. Okay. Sounds good. Thanks.
So should the 1 AR on T just like have extended or do the counterpoints? Or like to just like actually answer the definitions. Then I can just expand.
Oh,
extend it.
No, I didn't think you chose the wrong, well, sorry.
No, I was gonna agree with that. I think you
I
picked the
also
right
agree with
term.
that.
I mean, like again, I don't think any of us actually looked at any of the pieces of evidence, but like from like my like spidey sense on where I was at, I was definitely feeling F on those things. So that was like a good sign for y'all. Actually, though, Michigan, was there any definition other than like which were the definitions you explicitly wanted
I
us
read
to?
all the definitions, and I said independently they violate these, which is a T argument.
Okay.
And I think since I said these, it means multiple of them. But like obviously you could have interpreted it anyway.
Right, but these could have been any combination of
That's
those. So I
true.
only kind of interpreted it to be the last
Resolved
one.
Yeah, which
And
is
so
also
I was,
reasonable. Yeah.
I wasn't sure, but you had intended it to be all of them.
Yes, and then I think the 2NR said adopt energy policy and resolve, which was in the
Awesome.
2NR.
Right.
Yeah.
But there was sort of like I don't know how much
It
I
was
can
floating,
backtrack
like,
on
yeah,
like
yeah.
just because of like unclarity. So like, you know, this is cool going
Definitely
through
could have
but,
been
like,
clearer
just
about
like
which
which
definitions. Yeah.
Though you were right that like none of them are in the like the plain text, right?
Yeah,
So, yeah, like you know that's why it makes it hard to put that next to it.
So you're saying we needed to read definitions and then that could be our plan text?
No, I'm saying,
Definitions of our plan, like the words in our plan text.
Yeah.
So like for example, implementing this.
like, I don't think plain text in a vacuum is the right emergency 1AR argument. Like, that's what I meant.
Okay,
Like,
then like what should it have been? Like insert hidden T.
it's not,
Oh,
okay.
yeah,
It's not hidden. Or like it's poorly hidden, I guess. But like, yeah, I do think like it emerged, like the context in which that exchange happened, like clearly makes it an accident, you know what I mean? But like, I just don't, I think that is not the right arc to make. Perhaps an arc that you could make is like a standards type argument, or like I just mean like, whatever answer you make, it needs to be responsive, and this one happens not to be. Right, but like I also get that like the decision to choose this argument was made on the spot in extremely pressured circumstances, so like, I don't think anyone
It's also
faults you for like misaligning
Yeah.
that question.
one of the things that makes it weird is that the definitions for on the counterplan like are very clear that they all would exclude the courts, but they're not harmonized in the sense that they all exclude the legislative and all exclude executive, and that was what makes it hard to make this like a cohesive like neg strategy, because you would have like they're defining a bunch of words to be not, and I don't think plain text in the vacuum doesn't answer any of these, but they're defining a bunch of words to be not judicial, but they're not clear about whether or not it would or exclude the executive, because some of the cards actually say it includes the executive. And so like this is obviously unpredictable, like they don't, like we meet some of them, how on earth are the judges supposed to interpret a T debate in which some things mean some things and some things mean other, like it's just not a stable stasis point for any of the types of debates that they're going to try to claim. Now obviously they're not really making it just becomes like a yes no topicality question, because there aren't really standards here, but if you read you could also just, you could read a counter interpretation. You could say one of these is your counter interpretation. We will just defend that energy policy is either presidential or congressional, or I mean, I guess DOI is under the president. So like, you know, like some amount of authority there. Like any of those could be in, and it'd be like, and you would get your sort of more standard definitions out of it. It just sort of like, that is kind of what makes it like, it's like one is if it's only resolved, it makes plain text in the vacuum weird because it's not necessarily in plain text or in the resolution. And then if it's all of them, they're not a cohesive T argument together because they don't all limit out the same types of things.
Yeah.
So that's kind of how I would refocus out there without having to read a whole lot of new evidence.
Do you think the double turn made sense in the cap case? Innovation bad?
Yeah. Without reading evidence, absolutely.
Yeah, it was a good story. I also did not read it.
I thought that Connor's answer was fine though, like the idea that like innovation is motivated differently in the world of the plan, I think is fine, but I also don't know if that's very evidentially founded in the things that,
Some of
like
the
when
pods say
you
that,
answered
yeah.
that, I was like, this is a fine argument that I don't think was actually read in evidence. I thought it was an answer to a cross-text question that could give you an inroad, but given that, I think that it was a good thing to always have in your speeches.
For the delay perm, I guess, what would you, I'm kind of just relying basically on intrinsicness. What else do you think needs to be added? Because like obviously, it seems like delay is hard to beat. Is there a way to spin it as like this counterplan isn't literally just like delay with politics is a benefit, but like it's a, like how can.
Well, I thought you were right about that. Like, it isn't a delay counterplan.
Okay.
They did like, I guess that was kind of why I referenced the delay part of the debate like offhand. It's just like, it's not so relevant to me because I don't think that the fact that you read a should interpretation means that you justify the kind of delay counterplan they're complaining about because you also read other definitions. Or at least you're competing off other definitions, and I think there's a reasonable argument that like, now that I'm articulating it out loud, it sounds pretty unpersuasive, but that like some words in the resolution are a little more important than others. But like a counterplan that is competing off policy and as the like thing that the resolution demands be adopted seems to me like pretty important source of net ground. But then again, I also didn't think you linked because expediency is not.
Okay, so your issue to answer counterplans and plan was just the expediency thing?
I think that's a simple answer, yeah.
Okay, is there ways to get around that other than new cards?
Yeah, I would just say different card.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because isn't it
No,
accepted?
I think expediency is a good thing, and you're just like, bro, this is you're right, that card's like not super relevant to this counterplan, we're a policy pick, like, it's a core counterplan.
You think just to say, but that would get around like counterplan plan.
Why?
Because like, yes,
But,
the counterplan.
oh, no, you're right,
To
you do
answer
have
the
to
delay
keep the
part,
should
yes.
definition, but I just don't think expediency means that the plan isn't severance.
Yeah, so.
It's
should
not the
card-
fastest least necessary means
So we
of
should write a
adopting
card that
policy.
didn't define should as expediency, but rather strictly immediate. Is that what you want?
I think you can do that. I'm
Yeah.
just saying that I think even in a world where you define should as expediency, there is an argument that seems reasonable to me, but maybe I'm, out of the norm here. That like, the perm to have the court issue an interpretation that the federal government then complies with is arguably not the fastest least necessary
Oh, I see.
means
So
as an
it would still
understanding of
sever that
expediency.
Without
So it
making
would
us
sever
delay
should.
counterplan is bad.
Right.
Okay. that
Yeah,
makes-
that's what I meant.
Yeah.
That being said, like, I don't think this is my favorite counterplan
Yeah.
in the world, but it is a policy pick, and it seems like more legitimate than a delay counterplan.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm just kind of like on a purely personal level, I low-key just don't think should is immediate. I think the web is just better on should it's not immediate. I don't think it is. But I would say like if you have a better piece of evidence, so that was where my like spidey sense started going off, and just in terms of like why I was kind of vibing with what the app was saying.
Because
And
based
then-
on that, what else to be?
Yeah, I'm kind of thinking like, is there any way to like make all sequences sound like perm to both?
I
But-
think, with the courts, it makes a lot of sense, right?
Like that's kind of what I would think about it. Is like you would have to say like, 'cause you should defend the internal net benefit as like begrudging compliance, and the permutation as a type of agreement that might reimpose the political question doctrine, or like make the decision, like the court, sort of irrelevant to future decisions. And so, I mean, yeah, I would say like try to treat all sequencing type things within the
substantive deficits.
Yeah, and I think it is arguably distinct enough from perm to the counterplan that it's not like you're gonna make weird stuff and happen there. So.
I agree with that.
Okay. I guess last thing was, in the world of decay, 2 and R, I guess it would just be like a super late breaking debate of 2 and R have to use cards to answer the 1AR like alt stuff. How much do you think would have been, like, because it's like kind of weird, like the one is, and then the 2NC says it would just be command and control, the 1AR reads to deficits, like what do you think the 2 and R should do in that instance? And did you have thoughts about the rest of the debate? Because I thought that the accounting carbon link, the Dunlap card wasn't answered, but they answered like the toxicity warrant as a link, but that was like a sustainability warrant. So do you think that coupled with like risk of a link could have been sufficient? Sorry, that was really
about any of that.
Okay.
Yeah,
This is
I
all.
didn't think about this.
There was so much all like weird stuff going on that required sufficient brain power to not make me like think about this. I don't know, like I was vibing with perm double bind. I was vibing with like the turn stuff. Like all of these things would have had been answered. Like if there is a world in which your 2 and R looks lights out on it, like I'm not opposed to it. I don't feel like there is, you know, like a dropped argument that you somehow like missed where it was like, so like I definitely don't think you made the wrong decision in terms of what you did. If you did it would like this, if this was your 2 and R, like it probably would have been worse because of the drops in other places, but if you'd wanted to do it, I don't think it was completely vulnerable.
I guess just for everyone, I thought just to get around double bind was just like banned all markets. So there is no double bind in that sense because the plan literally doesn't exist. Does that make sense?
Well, the double bind is about whether or not the military adventurism would still happen. If the plan would, if the alternative is still sufficient to resolve military
But like
adventurism.
because like I guess I thought like link to plan would kind of obviate that, but also like the AF has to defend. I guess this is more reliant on framework maybe, which is not a place you want, but just the AF is committed to growth. We read links that the AF accelerates growth, so they don't get to.
Right, so if there exists one market for oil wells and every other market goes away, no more housing,
It solves
no
those.
more DIB, no more healthcare markets, all of these things go away. Like theoretically there might be a sufficient reduction in the growth incentives for military adventurism that impact wouldn't happen, or that's enough reduction in the number of resources that's being removed. And so I think it's more like the disconnect between how you're expending the cap impacts and the cap link. So like, yeah, you're probably right that they're creating a market logic in the, you know, oil wells, but oil wells is, I mean, to some extent it is actually a huge part of capitalism, but you know, to another extent there are also other markets that you would be destroying that might be sufficient to create shifts, especially if you're like fiating that Trump all of a sudden is like, hell nah to profits, you know?
Now that I've been reminded about like what were the moving parts in this debate, I totally agree. I think the AF could have really used a card that was like MBIs aren't necessarily capitalist or pro-growth, and that would like make this argument a lot easier. But I think even like basically, no, I do not find the argument that they like should philosophically be attached to capitalism persuasive as a means of competition. Like your alt is a policy. They permed most of it. That's legit.
That was all I have. Thank you.
Thank you.
One final comment that I just want to make just briefly is I kind of, like, it was kind of jarring for me in the 2NC, this, like, the distinction between the 1NC, especially with the arguments that were extended, like, it was just too much, I think, on case of the cap style arguments, and I think that you could have been, like, found more efficiency extending, like, the no impact arguments regularly cap K to make the speeches more consistent. It's
More just impact defense as opposed to.
yeah, rather than just doing the new cap style defense arguments. I also just think that like I felt like the climate change may be good stuff. Maybe it was kind of a waste of time because it would really like pigeonhole your strategy, and so maybe just try one in the same structure in that way.
I guess